Good evening. I will call this meeting to order. All selectmen are present. My sincere apologies on behalf of the board for our late start. We were in executive session that was scheduled for 6:30, and clearly we had an ample supply of business to talk about in there, discussing some real property issues. So again, apologies for the late start. If you could all join me and stand, we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask my colleague, Mr. McCoy, to get us started.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I wanted to just take a brief moment. I'll express gratitude to my colleague, Selectwoman O'Connell. This morning, she and I had some brief conversation. It is today the very regrettable third anniversary of the tragedies of Sandy Hook. And it was appropriately suggested that it would be in good form and appropriate to take just a moment of silence in recognition and honor of the families and folks affected by that tragedy. So just a moment, please. Thank you very much. So we'll jump right into the transmitting of Treasury warrants, item number 2 on the agenda. Treasury warrants 22, 22A, 23, 23A, 24, and 24A. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Discussion? None. All in favor? Approved. Unanimous. We have no minutes this evening to approve, so we will jump to our 7 o'clock scheduled appointment with Colleen O'Brien, the General Manager of Reading Municipal Light Department, regarding the 2015 accomplishments. Ms. O'Brien, again, thank you for your patience and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'll try to go as quickly as I can, and I just want to let you know that with me, I have Jane Parento, Integrated Resources Director, and Hamid Jafari, who must have just stepped out for a second, the Director of Engineering and Operations. So we have a team here. If you have any questions as we go through it, we should be able to provide the answers. Up here on the display, this is the cover of our annual report. The intent of that is, the theme for this year is peak performance. The concept of the drawing is really that, all the change management and, reorganizing the RMLD, it's been a lot of work. We're trying to reach the top. We'll go into some of the areas that we've reached peak performance, but once we get to the top, we're shaving the peak off because that's the most premium for the price of energy. So that's kind of the theme. The drawing was done by one of our engineers in-house for free, and my daughter put a little color on it, so we were able to save about $10,000. And this is the first year that we are 100% digital, so we didn't really send out any copies, including at the town meeting. So, okay, here we go. Just to cap some of the performance highlights since the last time we met, and just to go over that. So we committed to come in twice a year to give you an update of what's going on at RMLD and to provide an opportunity to ask any questions and anything that we may not know today. We'll certainly get back to you tomorrow on. So the last time we were here, we did talk about the organizational study and the reliability study, of which we've completed. We are providing the commissioners with an update for the recommendations. We took about 95% of the recommendations that we're implementing, and that's on somewhat of a schedule. Some of the organizational ones, like changing corporate culture, we couldn't really come up with first quarter of, so those are a little bit longer, but we're moving ahead with that. So as soon as I give the commissioners an update, when I come back in the spring, I'll show you that, and we can go over our accomplishments on those. But anything that was safety related on the reliability study, Hamid and his group fixed immediately. The organizational study, we're still rewriting the job descriptions and moving everyone around so that we can have the most efficient, business and as well as the system. Grid modernization tech map that I'll show you in a couple minutes and explain that. We're rebuilding the GIS system for accuracy. The AMI, Advanced Meter Infrastructure, there was an existing AMR system for the large 500 commercial customers. We're doing an AMI mesh on top of the fixed so that we're able to create two-way communications with our larger customers. And some of the residentials here and there will put in, we don't want to replace all the meters, just a couple of them so that we're able to get voltage and other types of attributes back over the system, so that we're able to provide that data into the SCADA system and be able to keep a pulse on how the system's going and be able to respond to any outages quickly. Peak reduction programs, we'll go over that real quickly. As I said from the front cover, the price of energy during the peak period of the day is the most expensive, so we're offering a bunch of programs now that target that. And then maintaining the reliability indices. The LED streetlight grant, electric vehicle charging station grants, external internal communications program. Last year our theme was go paperless, be efficient, get greener. The good thing about our mantras is once we create one, everything is incorporated into the business on that. So we continue to live by that, and we'll continue to live by peak performance going forward. But with that paperless program, we were able to offset costs by $17,000. We don't have to buy code red anymore. We actually, our customer service was able to go from 5,000 texts and emails all the way up to 17,000. So we're building it ourselves, and when we get to our technology map, we're going to go to an IVR system. We're looking at an app for your phones. So we've got a lot going on in that communication area. Paperless, I mentioned, we're still on a 6-year capital expense and budget. One of the reasons why we're meeting twice a year, if you remember from the first year I was here, which was 2 years ago, we wanted to make sure that as anything changes with the electric industry. So Jane's here, she's going to talk a little bit about the capacity and transmission increases that are coming down the pike. So, but because we're on a fiscal year and you're on a fiscal year, we're kind of doing our budgets at the same time. So the point of coming in now is to kind of give you a preliminary update of where we see where the rate's coming in, and then when I come back in the spring, we'll have a little bit more of a solid idea, and that way you can segue right into your budget. But I'll let Jane talk about that in a minute. Full list of accomplishments, you can go on our website, and it says annual report, and gets into a lot more detail if you're interested. From efficiency and peak reduction, I just want everybody to remember that out of an $80 million budget, 75% is power supply, which means it's a pass-through. We don't make any money on it. There's no markup. Whatever it costs, it goes through. But we are trying to target all of our peak reduction, which is that area where we don't make any money, but we are trying really hard to offset that cost with those programs. Capacity and transmission costs are forecast to increase pretty significantly in 2016 and 17, as I had mentioned last year. So we're looking at about a 7 to 9% increase, of which less than 2% is the operational expense. That's the portion that we can sort of control, but it does include, your OPEB and your pension trust and all the other things. So really, all you can really control is maybe a little bit of overtime, and everything else is kind of, it's not fixed, but it's not a variable cost. But Jane, do you want to talk about the?
Sure. Just to give the board a little overview on the capacity and transmission, because we're located in what the ISO calls the NEMA load zone, or the Northeast Massachusetts corridor, and as a result of some retirements of some generating units, primarily Salem Harbor, that was scheduled to be replaced by Footprint Power. So the ISO conducts an auction for capacity, and it's a rolling auction every year, looking out 3 years. So this upcoming period for 16-17 is when the Footprint Power plant will be rolled into the rates. And that was deemed necessary to maintain the reliability within the region. So currently, capacity costs on the wholesale level are around $3 a kilowatt month. Once Footprint comes in line, those capacity costs are going to be $15 per kilowatt month. So there's a 5-fold increase, and that gets rolled down into the consumers within this region. It's very difficult to hedge that unless you actually go out and build the power plant, and then you can receive some of that revenue. But as Colleen had mentioned, all of our programs, when we're working with our municipal customers, our commercial customers, and even our residential customers, we pay capacity based on our annual summer peak. And so we're tailoring all our programs to try to minimize that peak. If we're able to lower that peak, that factors into how much capacity we as a utility will have to go out and procure for that following capacity year. The capacity year runs from June through May, and as I said, it was set the previous year. And so we're working to tailor our programs to reduce that peak with, all our customers. Transmission, again, is socialized in the New England region. So over the last couple of years, billions of dollars has been invested in transmission upgrades. We work very closely with trying to minimize those costs. We're down at FERC, which regulates the New England region, and trying to minimize the rate of return that the transmission owners are able to occur on that. Right now they're getting about 12.5% return on investment. And we're down there filing to say, we think it should be more in line with 10.5% or 11%. But all those costs roll back down to the consumer, and those costs are average between in the range of 6 to 10% annually, and they continue to go up. So we pay about $90 a kilowatt a year for transmission costs, and that's based on our monthly peak demands.
Any questions on that? Grid modernization supports efficiency and two-way communication, accuracy, reliability, and safety. And this is Hamid's favorite picture. And basically, on the left-hand side, you'll see the meters and the advanced meter infrastructure. You see the automation on the poles. It will sense fault detection for outages and bring the contingency feeds, back around so that the switches will open and the lineman can just go fix the problem, but people get back in power quickly. It comes through a firewall off of antennas on the poles, into the fiber loop, into another firewall, and then into our SCADA and integrated system. Now this is a 10 to 20 year program. So this is our grid modernization program, and so the capital plan calls for this, but when I went over the capital plan, it's little baby steps. Right now we're just replacing the large commercial customer meters, which was already planned. We're putting in a couple of switches every year, and we'll be going towards that. There's a minimum that the state requires you to modernize, and so we're not trying to do anything more than just try to be more efficient. If you have any more questions than that, I can be sure to sit down with you, but that's kind of what that picture is showing us. Efficiency and peak reduction, Jane had touched on it. We have the controlled water heater technology program. We shut off your water heater for 2 hours a day. You get to save about $15, $20 a month. If you have an electric water heater and you're not on that program, give us a shout, because we have stuff in stock and we can have someone come out and hook that up. The time of use rate is more of a creature habit. You're shifting your habits off of the peak, which is about 12 to 7.
Correct.
And if you're able to do that, you could probably save about $15 to $20 a month as well. And if you're interested in that, give us a buzz. Renewable technology programs, we're working with each of the 4 towns to see if our green choice, if we can go towards something where it replaces green choice, so people that want to invest in green will be buying something that's producing power inside of our service territory, and also have an opportunity for people to invest in solar so that they're realizing a payback, a return on investment for their, so if it's a panel, you're actually buying a piece of the panel, it's like buying a brick in a brick walkway. You're buying a piece of the panel, so you get back some return on investment. And we're working on the exact details of the program, but right now we're at an RFP stage where in each of the 4 towns we're looking at all of the potential sites. We're working, Tom O'Lilla's been working with each of the town managers, and we have a bunch of different sites in different towns, and the point of the RFP is to get a number of different vendors in to work out packages, because you really can't come up with the financials until actually what the site is, which way does it face, how large of an area it is, and then we'll put those things together and we'll try to come up with what's the best package and then go forward, and we'll talk to, what's the next step? Talk to the town,
Correct.
Tom, and see if anyone is interested in that.
May I ask, are you
Sure.
talking about renewable programs for municipalities, the town administrations themselves, or for residents within each of the towns, or both?
It would be both, correct?
Both, yeah, we're trying to look at municipal sites so that it would be a win-win for both the municipality as well as the light department, and then the program would be offered to residential customers who wanted to opt into the program.
I see,
Right.
okay.
So for the town's perspective, it's like a lease payment or in lieu of tax, property tax. And then, because right now, the green choice is, you're buying into renewable, but it's someplace else. You know what I mean? And I just feel like it would be a lot more tangible if we were to put together something, as Jane said, it's a win-win in all the directions, and you can actually physically see, that, your renewable sources right here with, serving your own community.
Thank you.
Solar policy, just to mention that, solar's great, but from an electric standpoint, we also have to make sure that the electrons are stable and that our system has a stability to it so that it's safe for the workers and the public. So we have policies that we're writing on that would maximize how much load of solar that you can put on each circuit, because we want to keep things balanced. So we just want to make sure that when everyone says, yay, let's go green, that they understand that there's also an electrical engineering side to it as well that we have to balance. Distributed generation, we're looking at solar, battery storage, and a peaking unit. We put a peaking unit pilot in last year's budget. We're looking at that right now. That's in combination or in conjunction with all of the other programs. This would allow you to hit a button and reduce by 2.5 megawatts. That's typically a small gas-fired turbine that would go inside of a substation, and that would, for every megawatt that we save during the peak, it's approximately $60,000, just to kind of give you an idea of the peak premium. LED streetlights. On the left-hand side is the pilot program that we did last year, and it was a great success. We probably got 3 or 4 calls where we were asked to maybe just re-tilt the head, but everyone loves them. In Wilmington, we put 83 of them in. For FY16 target, we're now into the full implementation program. It's the 3-year program. So there's 890 lights each year for 3 years. We've got 330 of them done so far. And just a reminder that the $125,000 out of the $250,000 grant went to offset the lights. We'll get into just a little bit more detail here, and you can barely see that, but it says that the lights with the existing high pressure sodiums and the mercury vapors on the left-hand side, it says HPS, high pressure sodium mercury vapors, the wattage size and how many you have. It was 121,000, and with the LED, it'll be 83,000, so there's a savings of 38,000. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is on the 50 high pressure sodium, you see there's a minus sign, and I think I had mentioned this last year that the rate structure did not capture the capital costs, so we have to roll that into it. So there's a little bit of a loss on the 50 watt high pressure sodium. What's nice about the LEDs is that we're using a 25 watt LED for the 50s, the 70s, we don't have any 70s, the 100s, which is pretty nice, and people like them, the law enforcement likes them. So unless you have heard any complaints, we haven't gotten any except thumbs up. So I'll send this presentation tomorrow to Jeff, and then you can have up close on the LED streetlights, but we're moving right along. Some more efficiency and peak reductions. The commercial lighting rebates, I mean, we offer a lot of different rebate structures. You can go online and take a look at each one of them. The peak demand reduction, we work with Tangent in our commercial customers. So during the peak, if we give them a signal to say, listen, can you curtail your loads? There's a benefit that goes back to them, and then the rest of the benefit goes back into the rate. So everything, as Jane says, is targeted on the peak demand and trying to offset these costs that are coming through on the capacity and transmission, as she mentioned. We just unveiled our RMLD online store. You can still get holiday lights at half price and LED lights at half price. It's a great deal. And what am I missing? We had a presentation for for the commissioners where some of Jane's engineers came in and did a presentation. And I have to say, if you're a commercial customer or even a residential customer, it's like having your own little engineer. I mean, it really is quite a benefit, Jane's group, and what they have to offer and how they guide you through it. We have mechanical and electrical engineers, and they really have helped out a lot of the customers. And I was really impressed. So if you're a commercial company or and you want to look into it, you know, give us a call, and I promise you, you'll be happy with you know, that hometown, you know, ownership feeling that it makes that public power service, you know, what it's meant to be. For economic development, you know, this is a golden egg that's, you know, basically owned by the 4 towns. I don't want to get into anybody's business about what they want to do for economic development, but I just want to remind you that we're here. If you want, you know, we sell electricity, and, you know, that electricity comes back as a benefit to the towns. And, you know, if you're trying to encourage people to come in, you know, we kind of helped out a little bit when we had Osram coming in, and we'll be glad to continue to do that. We have a lot of programs to offer, and sometimes when you are looking at economic development, people sometimes forget to say, oh, and we have a municipal light department, because it really is it's a huge benefit in all kinds of ways. And but we'll be glad to help out if that's the direction you want to go. Capital improvements in Wilmington, Circuit 5W6, which you're, where's 5W6? Is that, Lowell? Ballardville area, for the Target area. We're gonna be building a substation in that area probably in the next 2 years, because that's the concentrated load where we're splitting up the substations right now to feed over by Target. And it's getting to be a tough area, so you'll be seeing a new substation coming in. I think it's in 2017? Yeah, start the design. And then some upgrades of different feeder cable, replace 29 poles. I'm gonna go into double poles real quick in a second. Notable services, and then of course, you know, the overall SCADA upgrade and the modernization grid that I was telling you, you know, affects all of the systems as an overall reliability upgrade. Proactive maintenance programs, these are all brand new. Transformer replacement, pole testing, manhole inspection, tree trimming, porcelain cutout, quarterly inspections. I mean, now all the substations are done, just like your car, at the back of your book in your car. It's like right on that 3,000 miles, the oil change. And so we're staying ahead of everything. We had some catching up to do, but we seem to be right on schedule. So that's a big benefit and a major change to going towards proactive. That was kind of like climbing that mountain there, getting the whole company to shift from reactive to proactive is an ongoing challenge, but we're making it to the top. On double poles, there really wasn't any tracking device before, and now we're going to use engines, NJUNS, and it's the information is put in by everyone that attaches and the custodians. So the custodians for Wilmington is Verizon, the custodians for North Reading is RMLD, half of Reading, and then Linfield is Verizon. So the custodian is essentially responsible for putting in the pole and taking out the butt at the end, okay? And then what happens is, once the pole gets put in, you goes on the computer and says, okay, you're next, like ball in court, you're next to go, transfer, 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 then get the pole butt out. So before, there really wasn't a mechanism to keep track of it. You know, how does the fire department know when they're next? So now everyone's in this. I can't tell you that it's 100% accurate, because we're doing a GIS data collection to build our GIS, so we're trying to make it, you know, double check the accuracy, and Verizon's doing an audit as well. So, but this is a great way to throttle me by the neck if we don't get all of our stuff transferred, but be sure that I'll get mine done that day before I come see you. So, but that's going to get more and more accurate. Probably we'll be done with
Next year, but This
next,
is a dynamic process, so the numbers that you see now, it might differ from
yeah, but
next
the
month to
GIS will be done next year, right? So
Yeah,
we'll at
GIS
least
is
have
gonna be
full
done
data
next year.
collection of all the double polls. Career development is just that change management I was talking about. We continue to work on that. I've changed to performance-based step progressions, which is a bit of a change. So, like I said, we move ahead. Annual reliability indices. Sadie, Safety, and Katie are our industry standards. We are below regional and national averages on all areas. One of the reasons why we collect this is not just to brag about it. We actually collect the data at 1 minute outages or greater, so that we know where to target our maintenance money on. So when you look at this chart, you can see the largest outage causes are wildlife, trees, and equipment. Equipment meaning like, fuses melting and those type of things. Transformers aging. So in those 3 areas, what are we doing about them other than those brand new 7 maintenance areas that come under that? For equipment, new system coordination study, that's just making sure that everything's coordinated, like you wouldn't want your main breaker to go before one of your area breakers in your home, you know what I mean? So we have fuses and recloses, and everything has to be coordinated correctly, and that will have the fuses operate properly. Proactive maintenance, inspection programs, the age of equipment, those transformers inspections and things of that nature. I mean, there's a cyclic way of, things, yeah, it may not have exploded yet, but it's like that fridge in your garage that's just keeping your beer cold that costs you a ton of money. It hasn't blown up yet, but it's not efficient. So each piece of equipment has the end of its useful life, and we have to stay ahead of it. If we have 5,000 transformers, you have to be rotating and cycling them out. And that goes for every piece of equipment that's on the system. Tree trimming, we have the new tree trimming program. We're working with your tree warden, and that seems to be going well. It's a 3-year cycle, and we want to make sure we're not rolling the trucks back and forth into the same area. We present tree vegetation plans to the tree warden. They get approved, and then we cut, and we haven't really had any problems in Wilmington. But we have had a reduction in the outages due to the trees. And then increased animal guards. I mean, animal guard engineering is just, just goes on and on. They'll create something that'll keep the hawks out of it, and next thing you know, the little chickadees will move in. It's a constant thing to try to keep the animals from causing outages, but we are making a little bit of headway on it. So that's it for the outages. Did I talk too fast? No? Good?
Oh, thank you.
Not too bad.
Thank you very much. Comprehensive, a lot of information there. I want to ask my colleagues here at the front if there's questions or comments to please offer them up. I'll start with Judy if you want to.
Sure. First, thank you very much for being here, and I apologize that we were late coming out. Certainly, it's a wealth of information. I definitely can remember some of the data points that you brought last year in terms of giving us a comprehensive update, or I don't even know if it was a full year, but there certainly seems to be quite an evolution going on at RMLD, and certainly the slide set proves that you've accomplished a lot. Respectfully stated, I know that in the grand scheme of things, our rates are lower than other communities that don't have RMLD. Obviously, I'm sensitive as a board member and as a resident in the town anytime you hear about rate increases, and so I'm trying to roll with the changes, and I see that there's a lot of efficiencies that are in place. But I'm specifically going to be interested in seeing how that continues to evolve year over year. And I know you talked about some of the lobbying that you're doing in other areas to try and keep those rates down so that it doesn't translate so much to the end user. I do want to say overall, I think that the service at RMLD, just from a residential standpoint, we have very few outages, and it's an exceptionally responsive company. So as much as I'm talking about the rates, I do see the value in terms of the customer service. So I would say overall, I give a very favorable rating to RMLD overall in the work that's being done. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that and thank you. Separate from that, I was curious to know, in my profession, I'm in the residential market for real estate, and I'm seeing in other communities outside of RMLD where solar is really being pushed at the residential level and houses are being taken over with solar panels. Can you comment on that, if you see that being something that RMLD will look at for the 4 communities in a big way and offer any sort of programs like that?
We actually already have a rebate program. We offer $5,000.
$2,000. Yep.
$2,000. Unfortunately, you can't compare it to like a grid system, because like National Grid, for example, has millions of customers. And so as part of their bill, they have to pay a certain percentage, 2% or whatever, that goes into this collaborative, so that certain people at the beginning, when solar got put in, they would get a fairly large chunk of money. But as more solar gets put in, that amount of rebate goes down. But no, we've been offering $2,000 for how long?
Well over, it started out at 5,000, and as well as the states dropped to 2,000, and we followed that trend. The only difference between an investor-owned utility and municipality, because we're not subject to deregulation, our customers have to own the system, so we don't allow third-party vendors to come in and basically sell power to our customers via PPA, because that would open up our entire service territory to deregulation, and that would affect all of our consumer base. So we're still a vertically integrated utility. Customers are allowed to put solar on their home. They just have to own the system. And they fall under our net metering rate, as well as are eligible for the $2,000 rebate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the compliment. I'll pass it back to the whole team, okay? Thank you.
I'll just make a quick comment. I'm going to give you another compliment. I owned my own business, and I was out snow plowing, and in my neighborhood, we had perhaps one of the worst winters on record. We never lost power. I wanted to tell you folks that not once did we ever lose power at my business at Lowell Street. My neighborhood, my home, I mean, that's need to be said. I mean, I think that's a good thing. You know, I mean, maybe we'll get a little windstorm tonight. They're talking about we'll lose the power tonight. However, during the worst of worst, not once did the power ever went out, you know, and I just thought you'd like to know that.
Yay,
And-
that's good.
And I've been always a strong supporter of Reading Light. I served on the Board of Selectmen in the 80s, and there were those that we could open our own power company. I was one, if the only one, that didn't think that was one of the greatest ideas in the world. And Reading Light, I remember Alan Ames, and I think you have a gentleman, Petroli, Pacino, yeah, I remember talking with those individuals years ago. But, you know, you've got a great track record. I think the guys that work and the women that work for Reading Municipal Light, you know, the people that actually on the front lines are out there working, they do a fantastic job, and they're always polite. If I had a light bulb out or something to that, you know, I'm renting it, they would come out, they would change it. And in my neighborhood, we do have one of those LED lights, and they really look nice. They really, really do.
Yeah, it's sharp looking.
I just thought I'd say that,
Oh,
so.
well, thank you. I'll pass that along. As far as the rate comparison, I mean, we keep that, it's in the board book every month, right? And, I mean, as you said, we're still one of the lowest in the state, and we're well below, you know, the IOUs, the independent operating utilities, and all of these programs are intended to keep that. But just as a reminder, we are deregulated. We have our we were not subject to deregulation, I'm sorry. We do have our long-term contracts, and the IOUs go out for, in purchase every May and November. So every May and November, they'll buy for another 6 months, and then they reconcile. So you'll see their price go up and down, but relatively compared to us, I don't think you'll see it come that close. I mean, it's gone up 38%. Do you understand what I'm saying? So our long-term contracts, the only thing that we go out into the market is we have about 17% that's in the market, and depending on how the market is doing, we might lock in some of that. And the rest of it's long-term contracts, like your nuclear, your base, your intermediate. But the IOUs got deregulated, so they go out and they buy power every 6 months. So that's how, you know what I mean? So someone might say, well, you know, they've, you know, I read something in the paper and National Grid's coming down. Well, they're coming down because they're reconciling for what they went up 6 months ago. And, you know what I mean? So we just want to, I'm just saying, let's compare apples to apples. So I'll start sharing the comparison to the town managers. Or actually, George gets a copy of it, and maybe you want to pass that along or whatever, and especially as these rates start to climb throughout the New England area.
Mr. Smagler?
Yes, again, thank you for being here. And I noticed today, or I heard today that the price of oil is $35 a barrel. You say you buy electricity a year at a time instead of the 6 months as the bigger ones?
No, we did not, in 1998, we were not deregulated, so we got to keep our long-term contracts.
Okay. So my point is, I think that
yeah.
the fuel's going down is,
Yep.
do you anticipate a large increase? And back to the beginning of your speech there, you mentioned something about a footprint of 3% to 15%?
$3 to $15.
Right.
Yeah,
Is that something that's gonna be passed along, like,
correct.
yeah, it's gonna be passed along? Now, how much, what's the footprint of, and how much will
Footprint
the
Power is the
average
name of the
price-
power plant that's that's replacing Salem Harbor. So
Okay.
Salem Harbor used to be a coal fire unit that was shut down because of reliability, costs, et cetera.
Yeah.
And as a result, Footprint Power purchased the land. They submitted a bid price to the ISO New England. That bid price cleared, and they anticipated, it's a $600 million plant that's being constructed there. And so that cost gets passed down to the region, the Northeast Massachusetts region. And so that's primarily, it's going to be converted to a gas-fired unit. And so in reference to your comment about oil being at $35 a barrel, electricity prices track natural gas in New England. 45% of our power approximately comes from natural gas within this region. So oil plays a smaller role than natural gas does, and that is reflective in the energy prices that we're seeing. I just presented to our Board of Commissioners last week, and our fuel charge, which is kind of the pass-through portion for the fuel. If we compare calendar year 2014 to 2015, we had about a 6% decrease that was passed directly to our consumers based on the energy component of our pricing. And so as Colleen had alluded, we kind of unbundled our rates. So we have a capacity and transmission, or a PPCT charge, and that's reflective of capacity and transmission. And then we have a fuel charge, which is the energy component. And so if you compare year to year, that went down around 6%.
Okay, so, I mean, I know it's hard to say with people that are becoming more efficient with their light bulbs and their appliances, but is there a number that you think may be coming up this year of the average price of an average household? Like the average electric bill might be up 5% or down 5%?
Yeah, that was in the first slide. It's between 7 and 9%. We said 7 to 9%. And of the 7 to 9%, less than 2% is the operation increase, and the rest is for the
Okay, so to your point of
power.
the light bulbs and the appliances, it'd be easy to save that 7 or 9% going forward.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
But an average is about 1,000, would you say?
It's around 750 kilowatt hours per month on average for an average consumer.
Okay, very good. Go out and buy some new light bulbs.
Well, my bill at home was about $120, and I replaced everything with an LED and got the bill down to 90.
That's real money.
Yeah.
have an online store.
I have recessed, I have 3 bedrooms, and they do have 4 recessed lights in it, so that might be a little bit more than some people, but yeah, everything. And compact fluorescents. I mean, do you ever go in your garage and the compact has to get warm, and you just sit there and you wait and you wait, you can't see anything, and 10 minutes later it comes on?
Yeah.
So the LEDs are instant on, and a lot of them are dimmables. So check it out on online store, because, like, for example, the holiday lights, it's 16 feet long, so it's 50 lights, and they're $6.05 with tax, and they run about, 12, anywhere from 12 to 20, depending on where you buy them. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Newhouse?
Thank you for all the information. I guess I would have one comment and then one question regarding kind of your message as I'm taking it. So my comment would be, if the Wilmington representative, I see George Hooper here, if there's anything that our representatives on the advisory board, CAB, right? If our representatives on the advisory board, if there's anything that they've been trying to accomplish that maybe hasn't happened, or if there's any recommendations they have for us moving forward, I'd certainly want to hear that. And then my question is really to make sure I understood a number of points that you made, especially as Lou kind of tried to ferret out that whole idea of savings. And so the message that I'm getting from you is that you have certain costs. Fixed costs isn't the right term for it, but they're not variable costs. So they're predictable, hard costs for doing business. And so what you're trying to promote is to have the ultimate, the people who are funding this enterprise, namely the ratepayers, trying to get the ratepayers to be more efficient, to drive down that cost, which in the end helps to offset the increase that is beyond your control as an organization. Am I getting the message right? Do I understand
Right.
it? Okay, all right. Because as much as I appreciate the wealth of information, I look at my bill and I see kilowatts per hour, and
Right.
I don't look at any of that. I see what the bottom line is on the bill, and I suspect I'm not the only one. So I'm certainly not being critical. More information's better. But I'm just trying to boil it down to something that I can understand you conveyed to us tonight, and that's that we all ought to be trying to save the costs that you have to pass through so we can offset the increase.
Right, during the peak. Because the rate, goes up during the day and comes down, and then it gets socialized when we do a cost of service on the rates, okay?
Right.
And so it's based on, historic data of usage. And so the cost during that peak period is significant. There's a premium there. So all of our programs are tailored to try to cut the peak down then, for our commercials, because there's an incentive to cut it down. I mean, for 1 megawatt equaling $60,000, it can have a pretty significant impact,
Right.
but that's just normal creature habits. We're not really talking about, if everybody went to electric car and we created a peak at a different time. You know what I mean? We're just talking about regular, normal, normal, what would you call it?
Load profiles?
Load profiles for right now, not considering, like I said, if all of a sudden everyone got an electric car and everyone plugged in at 8 o'clock at night, it'd be a different profile. And we'd have to figure out what we're gonna do about that. So we just try to look at the profile and when the peak is and try to tailor our programs around saving during that time frame.
And in terms of the peak, and particularly with the commercial ratepayers, I think you had made the point earlier that you're not presuming to tell us how to promote economic development, but if we want to make it part of our our town's efforts to promote economic development, you're pointing out that the municipal light department is a great selling feature, and
Right.
I think you specifically mentioned Osram. So my question is, do you find with your ratepayer, I would think that with that kind of money that's at stake for some of these commercial ratepayers, they must have people who are analyzing this, every month, if not every week, right? So are you finding that a lot of commercial ratepayers are leaving money on the table, or are they, is the nature of their enterprise such that they're taking advantage of it? What's the trend?
Some of it, you mean as far as the peak reduction programs and stuff?
Right.
Some of the commercial customers are just, they've been around a long time. Their company might not be set up to have like load management. Do you know what I mean? So if you were to build something right now, you'd connect everything into a load manager, just like you would do your home system to your iPhone. All right, and turn the heat down, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And you'd have it automated.
Okay.
But a lot of these commercial customers, if I say, listen, you can get $2,000 back, or you can get this back, if he's gotta run around and manually shut off all the lights, he might not wanna do it. But if he could just hit a switch and says, oh, you want 5%? Sure. So A lot of it has to do with the level of automation that some commercial companies have, and maybe as they do upgrades, they would think about automating more, just like you would do at home.
Okay.
But that might be some of the reason. Some of the reason could be like, you know, like a cold storage. You know, you just like how frozen's frozen. You know, can the fish be kind of frozen? I mean, that's a little, you know what I mean. So it's different people can do different things, and we just want to. We just have engineers that will go out and talk to them and say, you know, what can you do? Can we help you make your compressors more efficient? Can you shut this off? Can you run on this? And we'll help work with them and see if there's anything that they can cut, you know, and not take their production out of line. And also see if we can't, you know, help them go in a direction of automation so that they can have a little bit more control over, you know, what they're spending for electricity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. I feel like I can't get my head around all of it, but I get the message that seems logical to
Right.
me.
Well, if anything comes to mind, you can always let Jeff know or George, and if you think about it and come up with a question, we're glad to get back to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
All set, Mike?
Oh,
Yeah.
Just one question that I would pose, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Tennessee Gas proposal for running pressurized gas lines through our area and up through into Canada. I'd be interested to get a sense of how you believe, if this proposal is ultimately approved by FERC, if it'll have any effect on the RMLD rates. And, you know, certainly the project is going to take some number of years to, if it is approved, to be constructed. But does that project have any bearing, or do you anticipate it having any bearing on your future supply and the price of your energy supply?
I'll let you answer that one. That's our favorite question.
Yeah, we've been asked that as to the different towns that we go to, and it really all depends how they pass through the cost of that capital infrastructure. There's a lot of proposals on the table right now. The people that are very much pro the pipeline are saying the capital cost will be offset by lower energy costs. And then the people that are opposed to it say there's no guarantee to that. So I know there's a bill right now in the legislation where the investor-owned utilities are proposing that they will take on the capital costs and pass that cost on to their rate base. So the way it's structured right now, municipalities would not be subject to that. So if that was the case, and that people served by Eversource and National Grid would have a surcharge on their bill for that, then it would not impact us directly, and we would be benefiting by the additional gas supply into the region. The Attorney General just came out with a new study saying that she believes, based on a consultant, that there's no need for additional gas pipeline in this region. So it's a very fluid kind of issue that until the devil's in the details. Who's going to pay for the capital infrastructure, how much gas would be, and until all that gets really settled out, it's very difficult to determine whether the direct impact that it will have on our customer base.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting. You stole my question, Jeff. I was very interested to hear that answer, and unfortunately, I think you gave the answer that I expected you'd give, which is wait and see. And that's the regrettable component with this whole Tennessee gas pipeline component. But it was interesting to hear that those of us that are served by municipal light departments would potentially not be as affected by rate increases associated with the costs coming down to the ratepayers.
That's the current legislation, and
Right,
I'm not
right.
sure if that will pass or not pass
We'll see
again.
if we get to that point. Thank you. My only comment, other than the questions that were already asked, and they were all very good questions, is just that I'm emboldened and pleased to see the continued shift towards proactivity with regards especially to maintenance. You know, I know you said last year you were trying to get on top of that mountain of reactive work that had been sort of the mantra for a while, and certainly efficiencies come with that proactivity, and with efficiency come cost savings. So, and as well as reliability to us, the ratepayers. So, thank you for that, and continued continued efforts on that, I expect will come, so thank you.
Great.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you
Sure.
very much.
I'll see you in the spring?
Look forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
What are we doing with the audio visual? Leave that up, that way, get over it. Moving on to our next scheduled appointment, we are with Pepper Dining Incorporated, doing business as Chili's Grill and Bar. It is a public hearing, request for a new officer, director, and new stockholder. Jeff, I'll let you carry the ball on this one. It is a public hearing.
Yes, I'm not sure, is there anyone here from Pepper Dining? Good.
I'm Jen Souza, I'm the general manager of the Chili's in Wilmington here. I just came into, basically, I guess they're doing the same, just changing the stockholders, so the company and everything is still the same, and they're just looking to change the licensing to Brinker.
Right, so what we have, just for the board's information, excuse me, is this is a filing that has been done for a number of different Chili's establishments. I think there's 14 different communities in the state.
Correct.
And so essentially as a means to expedite it and to provide some measure of efficiency, the application for the change has gone through the ABCC. The individual towns must still approve of the change and essentially sign off on the Form 43, but the ABCC has completed a financial review, criminal background review as it relates to the two officers that would be assuming their new roles. The town, if any of the communities that are involved request to review the full filing, they can do so, and the ABCC will make that information available. If the ABCC's review raises any questions, they would conduct an informal hearing. The municipalities are notified of this hearing and can attend. A notice of the resolution to any questions raised would be provided to each of the communities. So as was mentioned, Pepper Dining was purchased, originally purchased 103 Chili's from Brinker International in 2007. Now Brinker is buying back these Chili's establishments. The change in officers, Brian McCrory is would assume the role of president secretary, and Denise Moore would assume the role of treasurer and assistant secretary. So those are the changes, one being that Brinker is purchasing the property, and the second being that these officers would be, are taking on those roles. So it would be my recommendation and suggestion that the Board of Selectmen approve the application for new officer/director and new stockholder of the all-alcohol license of Pepper Dining, Inc., DBA Chili's Grill and Bar, located at 207 Main Street, and further, that a determination is made that the license is not detrimental to the educational activities of the Learning Express located on Main Street, or the spiritual activities of the Jehovah's Witness Church located at Bridge Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. It is a public hearing, so I'll first go to the members of the Board of Selectmen for any questions or comments. I'll start with Mr. Newhouse.
None.
Mr. Snyder? Down to my left?
None.
Sorry. Nor do I. It is a public hearing. I'll go to the audience and invite any commentary or questions. I see none, and therefore I would close the public hearing and accept a motion to the effect, or a motion.
Make a motion to grant the request relative to what the town manager has stated.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. McCoy and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being here.
Thank you.
Our next scheduled appointment is with Beena P. Patel, 337 Main Street Incorporated, doing business as Subway, to request and obtain a common victualer's license for the property located at 337 Main Street. Ms. Patel, welcome. Good evening. If you want to briefly summarize what your plan is and what you have in mind?
Well, this is my third location, 337 Main Street. I do have two locations, one in Chelsea and one in Somerville. One in Chelsea is over 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And one in Somerville, which is just recently opened 6 months ago. And it's a family-operated business. Family will be running it. And it's franchise, so we just, rules and regulation applies through the franchise. So it's pretty structured franchise.
Indeed, thank you. Mr. Hall, do we have recommendations?
Yes. A recommendation from Shelley Newhouse, Health Director. I recommend approval of the application for a common victular license for 337 Main Street Subway, subject to meeting all the requirements of the Board of Health. Recommendation from Al Spalding, Inspector of Buildings. After review and consideration of the Town of Wilmington bylaw and all applicable codes, I have no outstanding zoning issues with the above-mentioned business.
Very well, thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Anyone?
No.
Anyone? When do you expect to open, may I ask?
Construction is, right now, we're under construction. So hopefully beginning of January, the first or second week. That's what our plan is, once all the approvals are attained.
Very good, early January. So therefore, I would accept a motion to approve the common victuals license.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Good
Thank you
luck.
so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving right along, our next scheduled appointment is with Maxwell Lee, doing business as Stop and Go, to request request to obtain a common victuals license for a property located at 2 Jefferson Road. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Good evening. Good afternoon.
Good evening.
If you could likewise, sir, give us a brief summary of what you're here to discuss.
I'm here to discuss doing business at Stop and Go. Pretty much keeping everything the same. All the seats and tables have been there for 30+ years, so I'm not changing anything at all. The only tweaks I've made were to the menu, which aren't major changes at all.
Very well. Mr. Hull, are there recommendations?
Yes, recommendation from Shelley Newhouse, Health Director. I recommend approval of the application for common victular license, Maxwell Lee Stop and Go at 2 Jefferson Road, subject to meeting all the requirements of the Board of Health. Then a recommendation from Al Spalding, the Building Inspector. After review and consideration of the Town of Wilmington bylaw and all applicable codes, I have no outstanding zoning issues with the above-mentioned business.
Thank you, sir. Any comments or questions from members of the board? I see none. I'll ask you the same question. Have you taken ownership of the place already at this point?
Yes, about 2 months ago.
Okay. And so pending votes here and approvals, you'd be opening and going into
I
business?
actually opened last week as takeout only.
Okay.
Because I don't have a common victular license. And really, I was just trying to get up and going, fill out the whole market and demographic in the community.
Very well. Again, I would accept a motion or...
I make a motion, we grant the request?
I have a motion.
Second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor of granting the request? Unanimous? Mr. Lee, good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have a good evening.
You as well. And our 8 o'clock appointment, we're catching up slowly but surely, is with Valerie Gingrich, our Director of Planning and Conservation, with regards to proposed zoning changes, Lowell Street and housing update. Ms. Gingrich. Thank you.
I am here tonight to talk to you about a zoning proposal
for an area along Lowell Street. The planning board's been discussing it. They discussed it at 2 of their recent meetings. And tonight, I'd like to give you an overview of what we're looking at. We're looking at an area on the first sheet, the map, along Lowell Street that goes from Dartmouth to the intersection.
Can I just ask you, okay, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we were focused here. We're trying to get our licenses in order.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
The area goes from, well, the outline of the area is the current general business district along Lowell Street. So it goes from Dartmouth to the intersection of Woburn and Lowell Street at Lucci's Supermarket. And just to give you some reference points, the number 144 on there is the 99 restaurant. The 211 is Lucci's Supermarket, and the outline is the existing general business district. So the green areas on here are roughly the wetlands. They're not exact, but that's about an approximation of where those are at. So the surrounding area around this existing district, to the north is residential. It's an R20 zone. And to the south is Textron, the general industrial district. The 2001-2003 master plan has looked at this area, and it was known as Perry's Corner, the intersection of Lowell and Woburn. And the master plan talked about how historically it was a mixed use. It was, there was a blacksmith, a cobbler, residential uses, a mix, sort of a village. And the master plan sort of harkens back to that and calls for this area to be more of a modern day village, adding some residential uses to the existing commercial uses. So it envisioned it to be sort of a compact, pedestrian-friendly village type of district. And what we have today, and you can imagine, the uses along here. We've got retail, we've got banks, we've got restaurants, we've got services, and we have the sort of commercial part of that mix, but we don't have the residential part of the mix. So the proposal is to add residential to this existing district, create a new district, but keep the boundaries of the district the same. Add multifamily residential by special permit, and that's the way that we currently do multifamily residential in the central business district, by special permit. So special permit gives a little bit more, special permit through the planning board gives a little bit more control over sort of the design, so you're making sure that you're meeting the goals of the intent of it to create a pedestrian-friendly environment. And adding the special permit, multifamily special permit, we would also want to look at what uses may be incompatible that are existing there or allowed currently. And that second sheet with the charts kind of shows you the proposal. The general business uses would all remain the same except for allowing the special permit for multifamily, and then taking the auto-related uses that are further down the chart and that probably are a little bit incompatible with residential uses like auto repair, amusement facility, those 4 uses there, switching those to not be allowed. Otherwise, the uses that are currently allowed would stay the same. The special permit, we take that from the central business district and sort of mold that for this area. It would be less dense than central business, but very similar in the way it's granted and the way it looks, I guess. It's not a full-scale kind of redo of this area, but it's a step that will provide some housing options. And we don't have many places in town where you have the opportunity to not use your car, I guess. And this could provide some of that on a smaller scale where you're creating a place where you could have condos, and if you live in those condos, you could maybe walk over to get your groceries. You could walk to a restaurant. Not that you could walk to everything that you need, but you would have opportunities to not use your car and stretch your legs. And when we talk about that, the obvious challenge is that intersection. So, with current permitting that has happened in the last year or so, the planning board has managed to secure some traffic mitigation funds. We don't have them yet, but they have certain times when they're supposed to be submitted. And with those funds, we plan to redesign the intersection of Lowell and Woburn to create a more efficient intersection both for cars and for people on foot. Sidewalks, crossings, upgrading those lights so that you can actually see them, creating turn lanes so that you're moving through there efficiently. So that is also sort of in this mix of, creating a village type of feel and a place that you can get around a little bit better. That's what we've been discussing. I'm happy to answer questions on the details. The planning board would like to pursue this as a zoning change and work towards what the master plan had visioned for this area and to create a sort of a node of activity right here in Perry's Corner.
Thank you. Well, certainly I'm gonna open it up to my colleagues for questions. I'll start, if I may. Can you give me either with a known type of building in Wilmington or maybe surrounding here, what do you envision? What are the kinds of structures that would come out of this kind of a zoning change?
The dimensional allowances would remain the same. They would be similar, actually, there would be the building on Church Street that's under construction currently.
Okay.
That's the type of, a 3-story, that type of scale.
Or the one just slightly up on the corner of, is it One Church that's already
Right.
constructed that has some
Right.
resident? Okay.
Right, and actually, with this area, you would probably have a little bit more open land than you do right there in the central business district. So they'd be spread, buildings would be spread out a little bit more if it was a multi-building project. But, that type of not that there's a certain type you have to do as far as design, but that's something that you could kind of point to. It's a condo building, there's 12 units, and that's something that you could easily see going into this area.
Thank you. And that's where my head was too, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Sure.
The only other question that I have is that intersection, it's Route 129 and it's state, so what's the interaction that we have to have with the state to manipulate that intersection?
Well, my understanding is that that portion of the state road is not controlled by the state.
Oh, okay.
So we would actually advance the design of that intersection, always consulting with DOT on design. But we would actually be able to advance the design further than typical because it's under our control. And we would have mitigation funds to go to 100% design with that.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie. I'll go down here. Mike, if you want to start?
Yeah, I own a piece of property on Lowell Street, and I was invited by the planning board to attend that public meeting. And I'll be totally honest, I do support it. It was explained to me, and by the way, I think the new director's doing a fantastic job. I heard a lot of great comments out there. And being involved in politics since the 80s, your attitudes change. At one time, I wasn't really in favor of condos or townhouses at one particular time in my life. But as you get older, you get married, you have children, and I think it would be wonderful to keep our kids here in the town because there are possibilities our children may not be able to afford a home. However, they may be able to afford like a townhouse or a condominium, a 1 or 2 bedroom unit. So I think it's a great idea. I totally support it, and I think it's going to fit it well. And we won't open up that old wound because when they did the construction on Lowell Street, unfortunately, we never received the sewer. And that's that group out there, but so be it. But anyway, I think it's a great concept. I really believe it's gonna look good out there. And we talk about Perry's Corners. I lived in Wilmington all my life. We had Mrs. Barrows that used to live there. We should be a shed out there where the school buses are. And if you remember, in the old high school, they had Barrows Auditorium. So that's where that concept came up. So Perry's Corner, very familiar with that area. And I think it's a great concept, and I do support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. O'Connor. Ms. O'Connell?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. It's a great presentation. I was intrigued to find out what you were going to say and what this was going to be pertaining to. I'm certainly open to it. Having the park close by that's going to be developed, I think would be a nice complement to something like this in terms of the adjacencies. And it's interesting to have this come out of the planning board. So, obviously, I want to ask more questions to the extent that you can comment. Are there any potential plans that you've heard that would fit into this right away if this would pass?
I haven't seen anything yet, but I do know that the old Walpole Woodworkers site is, there are ideas about that site. I haven't seen the ideas, or I don't know specifically what they're thinking, but I know that they have been thinking residential for that site. And, but other than that, I haven't seen anything yet.
So I'm questioning whether or not I should ask this question publicly, but I will anyway. You can obviously decline to answer it. The fact that this is coming from the planning board in this particular area, and I know that we're talking specifically about this, there are other stretches in other areas that aren't necessarily zoned exactly like this. Would that be an indication that the town is willing to look at some of those areas that are more industrial-based and would consider a more residential component if it made sense? So, for example, 38 on the other side of Cross Street, there's some areas there that adjoin residential areas that are not necessarily zoned exactly like this currently, but do you think that there'd be more of an appetite for a planning board to look at some of those areas and see some other intended uses?
I think I don't know if I can comment specifically on that location, but I think the idea is that if we create a mixed-use district that we're happy with, and we could see it working in other places, especially the places that the master plan, even though it's sort of older, it's actually, still pretty accurate in how it describes certain places. And North Wilmington, for example, it's called out as, same type of thing where there's a mix of use, there's a train station, you could have a node of activity there. So I think there are spots in town where you could have mixes, and we just have to figure out which spots make the most sense. But we're hoping that this creates a district that we can use in other places if we think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smaglia, I'll let you jump in next if you care to.
No, I agree what's been said already, and thank you for being here tonight. This is a nice presentation. Just when we were talking about maybe redoing 38 towards Woburn, there was talk about a bicycle lane if we got federal money, or is that something that would be applicable here if we got the money you were talking about?
Typically, any road reconstruction includes those types of amenities. The state pretty much requires a complete streets type of approach, so bicycle lanes and sidewalks, of course. It becomes a little difficult when you have limited right-of-way, and they are fairly reasonable about that. But that would be the goal, is to provide places for everyone to travel.
Right. That's what I was just thinking about, the actual physical space. It doesn't seem like it would be doable there, but looks good. Thank you for coming.
Mr. Nuss.
Yeah, just for informational purposes, and I know that Mr. McCoy mentioned the sewer, are all of the properties that would be included in this proposed district, do they all have sewer available? I can't remember where sewer starts and stops.
Sewer is currently not available in the district.
Okay.
There's a private sewer that Textron has that I believe 203 Lowell Street would be hooking up to that private sewer. I have heard talk about revisiting the sewer idea because most of this district is in the sewer district, so it could have sewer if it was brought to it. But it stops short of where we're looking at.
So when you say the sewer district, you're referring to the Tier 1 in the comprehensive water resources management plan. I know that predates you, so
Right.
I don't expect you to know that off the top of your head, but if you do know it, certainly
If
share
tier
it
one,
with us.
I'm not, I call it the sewer and non-sewer district, but
Right, okay.
it's what we mapped out as being available for sewer service. And we sort of drew those lines, but there is a process you can go through to, if you're on the edge of that line, to sort of, trade off in some places. But yeah, the sewer district, sewer service would be allowed and encouraged if the sewer could make it that far.
Okay. And then just as a point of clarification that I think is easy for us because we're looking at this, but if folks are listening and not looking at this, you're referring to the new prospective district as a neighborhood mixed-use district. And so, just so that folks can have in their mind's eye what we're looking at, it's a proposed district that allows for mixed uses within the district. It's not calling for mixed-use development on every site in the district.
Correct.
Right? So it's what it's paving the way for is for multifamily housing within areas that have established commercial enterprises,
Right.
right?
Right.
Commercial uses. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hull, did you want to offer any additional commentary at this point?
No, I think the presentation certainly covered the points. We've been looking at these locations, as Valerie mentioned, this location in particular in North Wilmington, as potential opportunities for mixed use. For the reasons that Valerie stated, I think it makes sense to be able to create opportunities where people can live in, at least to some measure, close proximity to some convenience settings, whether it's restaurants or grocery stores and so on. So I think this makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, you
Yeah,
said
just
you
one
want...
question was talk about, and let's stick with the format of additional housing. And I know we don't want to really like move heaven and earth. I totally support this concept. Let's say down the road, there's a piece of property, good amount, we're talking industry. Well, under special permit, you could add that category under special permit, multi-housing and industry. What I'm saying is, I don't think what we need to do is take industry and then adopt this whole new concept of general business, this, that, and slash, because a lot of times people go to town meeting, they tell you when to do this, but they end up doing that. So in the future, and I can see down the road that we might be looking at additional housing, keep that in mind, additional housing. But if we want to change heaven and earth, you know, I could see that being a problem. So if we have a nice big hunk of property in industrial way, because you were talking industry, well, under special permit, incorporate the multi-housing under general industrial. Don't change general industrial to general business and multi-housing, and then you got everything under one roof. You see, and I think that would be more acceptable in the future with residents. If the main goal is for housing, a lot of people tell you we'll do this, but then they do that. And that gives a bad taste in people's mouths in this community. So I just want to let you know that. So in the future, you know, if something is on general business, you want to add multi-family, that's fine. But if you got something that's general industrial, stick with the general industrial, add that under special permit, and you're still achieving your goal. Well, that's my suggestion, that's all. Thank you.
And I don't know if this is appropriate to, when Mr. McCoy was talking about a hunk of land and housing, somewhere down the road looking at senior housing in,
It's a good
In Wilmington.
entree to,
that's a good segue?
Yeah.
See, that's-
Yeah, we'll have Segway lanes here, too.
Okay. Beautiful, next.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good opportunity to transition. That worked out just like we
we
planned.
didn't talk to Valerie before.
No, I did not. Beautiful. Perfect.
Well, you may be aware that we recently conducted a survey, a senior housing survey, and we used the term senior very loosely because we said anyone over the age of 50, not that you're a senior, but you're looking forward and looking at your housing options, and we would love your input. So we gathered some information, general, basic information about who was answering the survey. We got a range of different incomes in our responses. By the way, we got just over 300 responses, which I think is pretty good. Range of incomes and ages, and most of the people who answered the survey currently own a single-family home, which isn't surprising. That's mostly what the town is comprised of. So those are the people who answered the survey. We asked about challenges, specifically cost, and what came up was the cost of maintenance is very high. That was the number one, and if you're maintaining a single-family home, that's going to cost a certain amount. The other overwhelming response was that it's just too much maintenance. So the cost of the maintenance and the actual time and energy with maintenance is too much. So going along with that, what we heard about, we asked what you would like to see for housing, and everything from size to attributes and location generally. And what we found was there was a mix of types. Number one on the list was condos, but followed with apartments and single-family homes in a fairly even spread. One thing that was definitely suggested by the majority is the size of a two-bedroom was appropriate. Most of I don't know if it's on here, but most of the folks answering the survey had a household of 2 people. There was some variation in that, but typically it was a household of 2. And layout and design, they were looking for a single floor, energy efficient, open layout, hardwood flooring. Exterior, they were looking for a patio or a deck rather than a large yard and the maintenance that comes with that. Looking for a small yard or just a patio or deck, and driveway, 1-car garage, and another overwhelming response was that when we asked about location, what would you like to be close to, a really large majority said that they would like to be close to shopping above everything else. And we sort of took that as grocery shopping, getting your basic needs, which makes sense. So this information is really helpful in helping us to sort of move forward with our planning for affordable senior housing and just housing options in general for folks who don't qualify for affordable. They're looking for a smaller type of house with, maybe they're wanting to pay a condo fee instead of actually doing all the work themselves at this point. So it was a good sort of message for us to look at more options and small options for folks that don't want to have all the maintenance and costs that comes with a single-family home.
It's fascinating information to see in this format. I'm certain that there's observations or questions. I guess I'll start over here to the right this time. Mr. Newhouse, if you have anything.
I really don't. I need to
Yeah.
I need to absorb this. Really don't have anything right now, but thank you.
Where was this survey? How were these people notified?
We had the survey online, so on our website, you could click on a link to it. But we also distribute it to the senior center, the library. It actually went out with the senior meal program. Where else did we have it?
The town clerk, I think, was a town
Yeah,
clerk.
town departments had it.
Okay. I was just, over 600 people took the survey. That's good, correct?
Over 3.
Over 3.
Right.
Okay. Well,
Oh, and we
that's-
sent it to the housing authority as well.
Okay. Is there any plans, and I don't know if you can answer this, is there any plans or anything down the road that we are looking for some sort of good size senior housing? When I say good size, I mean number of,
Yeah.
not just one.
Yeah, we're looking at sort of a two-tiered approach, I guess. We're looking at we have a lot of town-owned land that on the smaller side, you could do really small sort of cottage-style single-family. And it's only one unit, but it's a really good use of town-owned land, I think, especially if we can make that unit affordable. And that would be sort of the one approach to sort of gather those parcels and, put out requests to develop those parcels for affordable housing in groups of parcels. And the other approach, I think, ties in really nicely with the facility master plan that we're working on, where we're looking at sort of the moving chess pieces of facilities and where our current facilities are. When that planning is going on and completed, we'll have a good idea of where we could create some housing, whether it's a part of a larger senior center with some housing along with it, or if it's a different parcel that's just senior housing or affordable housing. I think we'll have a really good idea of what we have to work with at that point.
Okay, I'm not surprised by any of these numbers. A large population of my clients are seniors, and have lived in Wilmington there for a very long time, own the house. So a lot of this stuff is not surprising to me at all, the maintenance. But I think that we are short of senior housing in Wilmington on a larger scale than people might think. And to Mr. McCoy's point earlier about maybe our children can't afford a house in Wilmington, if we can get some seniors into some affordable housing, that'll take the burden off them of the house, as well as the maintenance cost and the taxes and everything that go along with owning a house. So maybe the children will have a chance to buy the house from mom and dad and stay in Wilmington. But this is good. Like I said, none of these numbers really surprised me going over them, talking to them, and good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr.
If I could, I know that I didn't have any comment earlier, but just in terms of kind of a philosophy, I understand there'd be, a myriad of different views on this, but I just don't want to be silent and not point out, another point of view. And just philosophically, my point of view is that most folks, I think, want to have their own home. Now, whether they own their own home or rent their own home, that's a different question, I guess. But when I look at some of the stats that you have here, with really focused on the maintenance being the primary concern, and then too much maintenance being kind of that related concern where on your graph just blows everything else away. That's something that can be done in the marketplace, through private development. And, the other thing that it seems to me is when you look at one of the specific items that, with respect to layout and design, people seem very interested in seeing the availability of single-floor living, so that they don't have to negotiate stairs up and down as they become infirm or whatever the case might be. So, I just want to make the point, because I've long believed that while there's a place for public housing, the reality is that, when there's a demand for public housing, it's not always Wilmington residents who enjoy that benefit. It's not. There are different people with different preferences. I know when we've probably all gotten a call here or there when folks are calling to inquire, you're a selectman, what can you do about getting into this housing or that housing, whether it's privately owned or publicly subsidized. So to me, when there's an increase in the supply of housing which accommodates a certain demographic, the first call that people make shouldn't be the politicians. The first call should be to an administrator or to a prospective landlord or, the property owner. So I just, I'm quick to to point out that when we look at, our effort to provide more alternatives for people of any demographic, including seniors, we need to look at the specific details that the data is telling us and ask ourselves, what's the best mechanism to provide that? And I just happen to believe that, automatically creating, and using town resources to create a lot of public housing, this, really big increased availability of public housing, may not address the specific concerns that people have as well as it could by zoning. I mean, we're talking about, in the last piece, creating the availability of multifamily housing. Now, my view is if we create an increased potential for multifamily housing, we're creating the ability to have one-level living. We're diminishing the amount of maintenance, both in terms of the workload and the cost that some folks may have to absorb. So I just want to, again, we all have different ideas, and there's probably no one alternative that suits everybody's needs, but I don't want to remain silent and not point out that the market can take care of a lot of this too, if we facilitate that kind of development through zoning changes like the one you presented.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
I think I would certainly echo Selectman Newhouse's comment, and I don't think it's our intent here to necessarily use this as an opportunity to create public housing. I certainly, for one, have some real reservations about getting into the public housing business. I just don't think that's a core function for the town. Certainly, we have a housing authority, and that's a function that they fulfill to the extent they can. I think what the intent is here is to create opportunities to foster housing in the private sector, whether it is through the sale of surplus property that may be available for development privately. I think that's really what I see as, and to the extent that we can make zoning changes like the one that has been talked about earlier, create an environment that makes it more amenable to fostering this kind of development.
So, Valerie, some of the questions that that were raised by Mr. House and comments made were in line with what my thinking was. You've got some data here that you've gathered. From your perspective, what would be your next steps now that you have this information? Where would you like to go with this? What do you anticipate as being? I know you're here tonight. That's probably your next step, right? Let's get a feel for where the Board of Selectmen is. And I think you're probably getting a sense of that. But what happens next?
Well, I think we'll be looking at opportunities to provide a mix of types. Some people would prefer, a small cottage single family. Some people would prefer a condo. And I wouldn't envision that the town actually gets into the development business. I think we, like the town manager said, I think we would want to surplus property with the understanding that it would be developed as, an affordable unit, or maybe you have a mix of affordable and market rate to make the numbers work for smaller parcels. But I think we got information that helps us know how to write that RFP, I guess, what people want and what they're looking for, so that we can, if we decide to use, town-owned land to further the goal of providing senior housing, affordable housing, we know sort of what to write into that proposal a little bit more than we did.
Thank you. I'll go right down the line. Mr. McCoy, if you...
I know it's at its infancy, so I just want to see where it takes from here. So I agree with what Mr. Newhouse had stated earlier. Thank you.
I think a lot of the comments, I agree with a lot of what Selectman Newhouse had to say, not to say that I don't agree with what other colleagues have said. I think one overlaying point, I think, in general, the term affordable has been used, and it would be interesting to say for a town like Wilmington, based on, I'm not surprised by these numbers. I'm looking at the income levels that are dictated here. I'm also looking at the overwhelming percentage of the responses here. They currently own their single-family home. So, without getting into too many details, I'm looking at some of the salary levels. I don't necessarily know that they would be defined as what an affordable, income bracket would look like. So how do you envision defining affordable housing? Do you know what I'm saying? So like what
Yeah.
average selling price,
Sure.
would you be thinking of when you think that way?
So affordable, I guess the categories here that would fall into the affordable is anything under the 55,000. And I think, I just heard a number lately, I think the sale prices for units are right around maybe 180 or something. So I guess it seems that we have a regional housing office that we share with Reading and North Reading and Saugus, and the woman who staffs that actually got a call a couple weeks ago from a Wilmington resident about senior housing opportunities in other towns because we don't have any. And I think we have an opportunity with some of our town-owned parcels to create affordable housing that actually fits into the context of our town, where it's not, a many-unit development where it's, a small single family. And because it's small and because it's simple, it's got, 2 bedrooms, 1 floor. It's a little cottage type of development that fits into, a surrounding neighborhood. That unit, I think we can develop that or have someone develop that as an affordable unit. So it doesn't have to be a certain style of house. And I think that those are the types of things that we're looking at with this information is that, people want all sorts of variety when it comes to housing options. And how can we help to further that? The market will help. With some of the rezoning that's proposed, we could get condos, apartments, that type of thing, but the market won't necessarily help us with those under the 55,000 income bracket, which we do have a good portion of that we'll want to provide more opportunities for.
Thank you.
And I have a question, and it's probably more for maybe Mike and Judy, although anyone that wants to chime in. The kind of development, for lack of a better word, maybe it's a 2-unit, 2-bedroom, 1-level, 1-bath kind of facility with maybe several units or several small little cottagey type houses in a neighborhood, if you will. Is that attractive? If I'm a developer and I have admittedly limited resources, am I going to be more inclined to develop, $500,000 to $600,000 houses and sort of, that's my business, so I want to be profitable. Is it more profitable, more attractive to me as a developer to do those than it is to do several of these smaller type of cottages in a neighborhood? Or can the town create an environment or a mechanism by which a developer would look at that as an attractive investment? And maybe it's a rhetorical question, I don't know.
No, I think you're going to always make more money with the market units. That's why there has to be some sort of requirement to, whether it's, and that's why I guess I brought up the town-owned land piece, is that we have parcels that could be developed as affordable, and that would be the way that we could make it actually happen, because the market's not going to provide those any other way.
Yeah, please.
And I guess I don't have a direct answer to the question that you pose, but again, kind of going back to a macro view on things, from my standpoint, the point that Valerie made earlier about diversity in housing is as important as trying to create affordability by some definition driven by income. I mean, so that, I know that we all have this idea ingrained in us that part of the American dream is to own your home. That certainly was part of what I wanted to do when I was a young adult. But the reality is that not everybody is necessarily in a position to be the owner of their own home, and there's nothing the matter with having a thriving rental market within certain parameters. There's nothing the matter with having a thriving rental market that the diversity of housing can accommodate. I mean, a 1 or a 2-bedroom unit is going to be more affordable for young folks and older folks alike than the 3-bedroom median, ranch split, whatever, kind of that median house in Wilmington might be. So I think that, that the focus needs to be philosophically on providing more diverse housing and doing it in a way that doesn't pose an undue burden on our school system, public safety, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's when the devil's in the details a bit on the zoning, but that's how the zoning can help facilitate that. So I don't want to be dismissive of the idea that we have some obligation to provide affordable housing, as that term is defined by the state, and providing a minimum 10% of your housing stock to be affordable and all that stuff. I agree with being proactive and having some focus on that, but really the bigger picture ought to be on providing diversity that allows people to have home ownership, rentals, and a stock of housing that has, everything from 1-bedroom to 4-bedroom. That's, and I think that is what, all of us are kind of touching on in different ways. But when I hear Valerie make that point, I feel compelled to underscore it. I think that's important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think the diversity in housing is key, and I think some of the new projects that are coming up are just what this town needs. I mean, a lot of people want to get in the game, I don't want to get too far down the track in the discussion, but, mortgage interest rates are, they're continuously indicating that they're going to rise. I mean, there are people that don't quite have enough to get into that medium-sized household in Wilmington, but want to be in town. And so if you can get into some of the sub-350 pricing points and give people an opportunity to own, whether it's a condo, situation or an affordable home, there's definitely, a population that would be interested in that. And I think it's a need right now. I think it's starting to be developed, like Whispering Pines, for example. I talked to the realtor in detail, just this week, and, they're already taking reservations. So, I mean, we were part of, lifting a deed restriction and making that, a project that could be completed. And that's, to Mike's point about not overstressing public safety in schools, but, there is a need, for housing. And I think we're starting to do that. And I think the senior piece should be looked at. It was something that, town meeting wanted us to do. But, I think we need to be cautious about what we take on and how we do it. And I think you're doing that, obviously. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, then you have traffic and everything else, so, I could go on, but I won't.
Thank you. Indeed, well said. Anybody else? Blue, if you want to ask a question and segue to Valerie's next comment, that would be, no. Thank you, Valerie. Do you have anything else for us?
I didn't think so.
Okay, good.
That's why I had nothing.
Right, I know. Just like in rehearsal. Thank you very much for being here this evening. It may indeed turn into somewhat of a segue, because our next scheduled discussion is us, a Board of Selection, about the fiscal 2017 budget. And I'll turn it over to Jeff. Jeff proposed or put in our packets a discussion of his process for how he goes about assembling the budget. And at our last Board of Selectmen meeting, you will recall that we had some preliminary discussion. Mr. Hull had wanted to have an open discussion, and I agreed that it was worthwhile to put it on an agenda item for a Board of Selectmen meeting to allow us each to offer up maybe some priorities or some thoughts of specific areas of opportunity, for lack of a better word, that we individually, or perhaps if through the conversation as a group or as a majority, can wrap our arms around and give Jeff a sense of where we are with our priorities and whether or not he can fit them into budgetary planning, et cetera. So I don't know if I summarized that very well, Jeff, but I'll let you complement it, and then we can have the discussion.
Sure, I would just make a few points in terms of the process that, some of the factors that I'm looking at. My intent in preparing the budget is to limit the overall budget increase to 3%. That's the goal that I've established. I would expect to continue to recommend that we set aside significant money for some of the issues that we're dealing with, the OPEB liability and the retirement liability. If you recall, last year there was $1 million that was earmarked out of free cash into the OPEB account, and then another $500,000 went into the retirement account. And just as a, you'll recall that when we had our review by Standard & Poor's, we really received high marks in all categories. I think the one thing that perhaps kept us from going from a AA+ to a AAA community was the concern that Standard & Poor's had about our OPEB and retirement liability, and the ability to, at least to some measure, fund those to a greater degree. So that is clearly an emphasis. And also the capital stabilization. Again, I'm anticipating recommending a significant sum to put into the stabilization account. The capital budget that we have, the 5-year plan, we've got about $35 million worth of projects. Obviously, they're not all going to be funded in 5 years, but the document in large part is intended to identify the priorities that the department heads have identified, the issues that we need to be addressing. So to the greatest extent we can, we'll be looking to fund, continue to fund capital projects. Beyond that, for this particular fiscal year, I'm looking at the 3 open contracts that need to be negotiated, so there'll be salary implications. Health insurance continues to be an issue in spite of the efforts that we've made over the last few years. You'll recall about 4 years ago we made changes in deductibles and co-pays. We eliminated a particular plan that was particularly costly. I think that's had some, that's helped us in reducing the rate of increase. In spite of that, this year we're looking at somewhere in the range of a 7.8% increase in health insurance, which is roughly $1 million. So that is clearly a concern. Our Health Insurance Advisory Committee is meeting again to look at additional ways to try to stem the tide, if you will. The other point I would just make is, I don't know if anybody saw in the Boston Globe, I think it was Saturday? I think it was Saturday's edition. There was a piece written about the state's dwindling rainy day fund, and it notes S&P's concern about the AA+ bond rating of the state, and basically suggests that in the last few years, the state has perhaps used some of its rainy day fund for, rather than those extreme instances, more bridging the gap for operating type things. So, and this has been pointed out in various venues, but I think one of the messages there for me is that the rainy day fund that for the state has been depleted to a significant degree. They're going to be looking to replenish that, and I think that may have some bearing on state aid in the coming years. So with all that being said, I think we do have some challenges. We'll certainly get through them, but, I think we, as we've done for many years now, have to be very judicious about how we're spending taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. So, in the interest of just really creating an open dialogue to the extent that we can, I don't know, I guess we'll try to do it the way we do with questions when we have a panelist here. So we'll just allow each person to have an opportunity to speak, and then, there'll be questions of each other, to each other, and we'll just see how it goes. So I don't know if there's someone that wants to start us off. Rather than me picking a side to go with, if there's anyone that is prepared to jump in, throw a hand up and I'll start with you.
I'll start
All right.
if nobody else is inclined to do that. First of all, just as what I consider to be kind of a preliminary item, and I did have conversations with the manager this past spring during the budget season, and I think that, I think I made a point that he was amenable to hearing, if I understood. In terms of the budget presentation, historically, we've had the pink book, the personnel book, which accompanies and complements the detailed budget and particularly the expenditures, departmental expenditures in the budget document. And historically, we always had, as a column in that personnel book, a recommendation by the town manager for that upcoming fiscal year. I'd like to return to that layout of the personnel book. And I think it really helps the casual observer and helps us, and I have to believe would help the finance committee, that if we have a vacancy in a particular position, to understand the following year, is it intended to remain vacant? Will the position be done away with by attrition? Or is it something that we intend to fill? And if so, what's the recommendation on that? And I know that the manager and I have had a couple different conversations on that. And I think that'd be helpful to, to have that information again through this year's budget presentation, and particularly the personnel book. In terms of substance, I really only had, and when I say substance, in response to the manager's invitation to us for feedback and input, it was priorities, concerns, and presentation materials. So that point is about the presentation materials. In terms of concerns and priorities, I guess one of the things that to me seems manageable for the town to be prepared to fund would be the cost of a fireworks display if that were to become necessary. And what I mean by that is, I understand there's a process by which the 4th of July committee has done such a great job over the years putting on festivities which are intended to help defray the cost of the 4th of July festivities, and I think historically was in order to fund the fireworks. And I'm really pleased to hear that that the fireworks display appears as though it can move forward in the vicinity of the common area, and it appears as though we're going to be making that move. So if for any reason there's a funding issue down the road, I would just like the town to be prepared to either address that or at least have the manager look at that as part of his budget review. And it's been a little while since I kicked around those numbers with anyone, but I seem to remember roughly $35,000 to $50,000 in town resources are in fact allocated to those festivities every year, for DPW and public safety services and all that kind of stuff. And so, compared to what we get, if there's a shortfall of any kind, it seems to me, that we ought to look seriously at whether or not we're able to, to subsidize the fireworks display itself, or a portion of it if that ever became necessary. And then the last item is really kind of it's not specific, but I think it is consistent with what the manager has indicated in his memo is important. I think it's consistent with the sentiment that I sense in town, with a real concern over addiction and substance abuse and treatment and making funds available. And I know that at our last meeting, we had, I apologize, I'm blanking out on the name, but when the woman, thank you, come in and was publicizing the effort that she's spearheading to assist so many folks that are stuck in that situation. And I was very pleased, and I just want to refer to them so that I don't make a mistake. But in October, recently, and then again, there was a nice blog again this month, but in October, the superintendent of schools had a couple of blogs that I found very interesting, and I really give her a lot of credit for assuming what I consider to be a leadership role in talking about emotional and behavioral problems and the need for the school department to address social emotional development. It's not just about reading and writing and arithmetic. And I think what's important to highlight for folks like me, who frankly I consider myself an old-fashioned, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of guy. Honestly, I think that we need this kind of information that helps us to understand just how important it is to address, the social, emotional, and developmental disabilities and impairments that so many kids have. And if you check out the superintendent's blog, there's some very compelling statistics that have recently come out. And I won't recite them, but I will say this: if, as a town, we're serious about trying to help and to prevent things like substance abuse and mental illness, we have to tackle that in the schools. And so I just think that it's important from the town side of government to publicly acknowledge that effort by the school department and to encourage and support the manager, who has laid out kind of a real overview, general budget message here that includes things like addressing substance abuse, and includes things like ensuring that Wilmington students are prepared for the challenges and opportunities of college and life beyond high school. So the reality is that there are so many kids who have, neurological and physiological impairments that just require specific instruction, and it requires, the development of them as a whole. And we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to beat back substance abuse without addressing the education of people with special needs. It's not going to happen, and the statistics, everywhere you look, kids with dyslexia, autism, nonverbal learning disability, name them all, and they have an extremely high incidence of mental illness and substance abuse. So I think I just want to generally articulate my support for what the superintendent and the school department and the school committee appears to be trying to do. And I hope that within the budgetary constraints that the manager has outlined, that somehow as a town side of government, we can support that. And the last point that I'd like to make is that I recently looked into kind of a measuring stick for what ADA compliance requires cities and towns and government in general to spend. And in a very general way, it seems that your larger construction projects, roughly 1% or so goes towards ADA compliance. And so I don't want that note to be taken out of context. I don't want anybody to think that I'm up here saying, geez, that's, why do we spend that money? We don't need that. To the contrary, my point is that we have all become so accustomed to accommodating people with physical disabilities that we don't even think about it. We have an $85 million school project, and if the general rule is right, 1% of that, something to the order of 850 grand, we spent to accommodate people with physical disabilities, and I'm all for it. But we don't even think about it. I mean, with the small number of vocal detractors of that project, of all of the things that they were critical of, not a one of them suggested that, we would try and build something that wasn't ADA compliant and didn't accommodate people with physical disabilities. I guess what I'm trying to the point that I'm trying to make is that just because a disability is invisible doesn't make it any less significant. And I think that we need to, as a town, as a society, as a government, we need to continue to acknowledge and try and find ways to support and accommodate those people. Because if we don't, we're just throwing money away on the symptoms. We're not really addressing the underlying problem. So I know I went on a little bit more than I might have, but I appreciate your time.
Appreciate it as well, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Newhouse, obviously very articulate and impassioned, and I certainly concur with the spirit of everything you said. And Mr. Smaglia, please take the floor.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mike, well said. And dual diagnosis is a big part of what you're talking about, and I kind of deal with it every day. And the bullet point here to provide resources to assist those affected by substance abuse, I think, is a extremely important bullet on the page here, and part of the budget. Dealing with what I deal with every day, like Mike touched on with the dual diagnosis, is a huge part of substance abuse, and we have to go after this head on. And the fact that Jeff thought of it so much to put it into a budget is outstanding. And I agree with everything that Mike said, and it's all good.
So I'll take chairman privilege here and go next, if that's all right. Sorry, folks to my left. So I'll start where I think we left off, and then I'll kick into some of the things that I had. I certainly concur, and I'm awfully delighted. Well, delight is the wrong word to use, I guess, in this context, but delighted that the town administration, in conjunction with the school administration, have earmarked and are focused on investing for the benefit of and getting ahead of the rather than just the symptoms, but getting ahead of the causes and working with folks that are impaired in whatever means that they are impaired, whether that is intellectually or through addiction or whatever. We need to get a better understanding out of it. I think, Mike, you said you went on a little long. You know what? That's the first step in this process, or at least it's part of this process of having this open dialogue and having the discussion. And I'm glad we have this opportunity tonight to have the discussion. And I compliment the manager for including that in the budget going forward. Other things that I saw in your document that I want to, I guess, prioritize from my perspective. You mentioned, and I won't find it in the document, that there's the potential going forward that the state may pull back on funding for full-day kindergarten. And I would be strongly of the mind that we, as a community, the school committee, school department, and here at the Board of Selectmen level, really wring our fingers before we decide to pull a full-day kindergarten program, even if the state decides to not fund it. I don't have any grand ideas as to how to fund it, by the way, but I would like to think that, I would like to hope that we would be able to manufacture or meander or in some way, think creatively in terms of budgets to maintain a full-day kindergarten program. My children were beneficiaries of that, and I believe that it was well worthwhile. I believe it is well worthwhile. So I hope that that will be something that we can focus some attention on. With regards to the budget documents, Mr. Nels, obviously, you and I spoke about that last spring, and I certainly concur that it's helpful to have the same comparative view year after year that's consistent. My only additional comment to that would be to Mr. Hall, if in the process of preparing budget documents or preparing reports that would be included in the budget documents, if there's some need or desire from your part or from your department manager's part to affect some type of change in the way that that information gets related to the community or us, compared to the way it has been in the past, the rule that should apply with everything is communication. You know what I mean? Just if there's a reason for a change, then we ought to just have that communicated clearly up front, so that there's no sort of trying to wrestling with, geez, why aren't we seeing what we used to see? So communication would rule the day. Two other quick things here. It may not be in this year's budget, and I don't think it's going to come out of the facilities master plan analysis, but I have had a couple of folks come to me over the course of the last year or so, and I think you and I have had some conversation about it, Jeff, that there are two areas, I'm sure there's a number of more than two, but there are two particular areas geographically in town that don't look as good as I guess they should. And I want to be a little careful about how I articulate that. One is the area in North Wilmington, adjacent to Jefferson Road near the train station. And I think there's some industrial trucks that are parked in that area, and I'm not sure, I think most of the land probably is private land. But it's in my opinion, in disrepair. It doesn't look as attractive as the town is. I feel like the community of Wilmington is a better community than that piece of property looks. And unfortunately, it's an area of town that I think so many folks travel past, and many of those folks are not from our community, and perhaps will make an impression of who we are as a community based on an unkempt hunk of land, whether that's our land, MBTA land, or private land. I wish there were something, and maybe there is something, that can be done in cooperation with the landowners to do something in that space to make it look better. And perhaps it's part of this rezoning for a mixed-use type of environment in that area that would help facilitate a charge towards that. The other area is similar, and that is on Route 38. As you are approaching, if you're on Route 38 heading north, and you have the karate place on your right, it's karate now, and just to your left is the tracks. You're heading towards Route 62. So I don't know if you folks all know where I am.
So you're talking about beyond Cornerstone, but before 62?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. There's a billboard on the left in that area. I think it's after Firestone, and there's a little strip mall in there. And just the whole left side area where the tracks run before the tracks go over into the station, in my opinion, is fallen in disrepair. I don't know if a fence would resolve some of that, but it's an eyesore, in my opinion, and I've had some folks come to me and say, who owns that? What can be done about that? And I think it might be MBTA land, and hard to get any momentum from the MBTA to do anything in that space. I'd love to see us work maybe collaboratively with the MBTA, Mass Transit, whoever owns that lot, and do something that is consistent with the quality of the town that we live in. Lastly, I've become aware that there are some of our surrounding communities that have instituted a new position within their town hall. I'm not advocating that we do it. What I am suggesting is maybe there's merit to the idea. The position is an economic development director or a manager of economic development. In this particular case, the town of Lexington instituted an economic development coordinator. And I'll read briefly. The Economic Development Coordinator will perform a variety of technical and professional work to advance the economic development efforts of the town, and in Lexington's case, with a focus on tourism and leveraging the local visitor-based economy. We don't certainly have that same opportunity as Lexington does with their historic richness, but I think there is an opportunity there. In Billerica, where you're from, the responsibilities include developing, coordinating, and implementing strategies for creating and retaining a vibrant commercial environment within the town. And then in Bucksport, Maine, I found these online, by the way. Their Economic Development Director works closely with the Bucksport Chamber of Commerce to identify areas of concern and promotion of business location and expansion within the town, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more to that, but the general gist of it was that Valerie clearly has expertise in terms of zoning and potentially creating opportunities for industry to grow and thrive through some of the creative zoning techniques that she discussed with us this evening. I don't know, perhaps there is merit to a more strategic focus of someone who could work in the planning office or perhaps under your direction, really working with the local business community and reaching out, looking for new businesses to set up shop here in Wilmington. I think we have a rich opportunity, North Wilmington, near the Target area, Ballardvale. We have the luxury of being able to put many businesses in our community that aren't in and amongst the residential areas. And if we had a strategic, targeted manner as in terms of going out and sort of recruiting and marketing to those businesses, perhaps we would benefit from that. Perhaps we wouldn't, and that's why I wanted to raise it just as food for thought for some future date, whether it's this year, next year, or some other day. That's all I had. So I'll move on down the line. If anyone wants to kick me in the shins for any of anything I just said, have at it.
If I could just make one comment with regard to your suggestion about the property on Main Street between Cornerstone and 62. This issue has been brought to my attention by a couple of people as well. And I've had some conversations with Mike Woods, Public Works Director, who has spoken with contacts that he has at Mass DOT. We've not been able to make any progress there. We will certainly take another look at what opportunities exist. From all I've been able to gather in my conversations with him, it is just not a priority on their list. I know, because I had also talked about even putting some kind of evergreen hedging that would just kind of serve as a barrier. I guess there's an area that they need access to for particular purposes, and that's, at least in part, what we're told as to why, that open area is created. But there's no question that is not a particularly appealing section of town. It's a matter of getting the right levers to move.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just be brief, quickly, because it restrains of Prop 2.5, we need to stay the course of a conservative approach. We as Board of Selectmen need to talk collectively when it comes to future capital projects. However, that doesn't limit us to make sure that we take care of quality of life issues for all our Wilmington citizens, young and old. And as my colleagues, Mr. Newhouse and Selectman Samagi stated earlier, those are things that we really need to consider. So those quality of life issues are very important, dear to us. So that doesn't limit us to those things, but we got to keep in mind of the budget and how we proceed. But obviously, there are priorities, and I believe those issues that were brought up earlier are great priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy.
There really isn't a tremendous amount more that I can say that hasn't already been said. By not saying anything, I don't want it to be viewed as if I'm not actively engaged in making some of the same comments, but I don't want to by any means elongate the meeting. As has been stated, the manager put together a very comprehensive list of the things that I think we traditionally, I don't want to gloss over any of them, but the typical things that we typically see, like our personnel and our salary requirements and collective bargaining needs and capital improvements for our buildings and technology and what I'm pleased, to hear tonight is I think we're adding a new dimension, which is that dimension of the social and emotional and the substance abuse issue that I think that for many years people really didn't want to talk about. And I think we're starting to really shine a light on it. And I think in addition to spending time as a community and having events is that we're going to have to spend some money on this. We're going to have to spend some money on it. We're going to have to potentially either add staffing, whether it's at the school level, public safety, health in general, to be able to take care of this. And I think, it can be someone that has a special education factor, or it could be a valedictorian of a class. It could be someone in between. It could be a senior. It could be a veteran. It could be anyone in our community, and I think we have to look at it at every level. So I definitely think, in addition to, what you said, Michael, in terms of futuristically, which wouldn't necessarily be viewed in this particular budget season, but I definitely think the central administration building has been brought up, a fire substation has been brought up. I think those two things long-term, should be on the radar screen, maybe not in this budget season, but going forward. And then also, too, I wonder, not wonder, but I think continuing to look at our emergency response to see if at any point in time we can bring some of those services in-house, because I know we do a lot of medical transports and a lot of medical services, and I wonder if that down the line, maybe we're not ready for it now, and I understand that we have collective bargaining agreements to honor, but I do believe that would be a revenue-producing opportunity to continue to look at. So as much as we've talked about all the things that I think we all would somewhat endorse, I think that there are some other opportunities. You talked about an economic development. What are some of the existing services that we provide that we may be able to look at those things in a different way? So I know that goes beyond FY17, but while we're talking about this, I want to bring it up. I just want to go publicly and say that I know that there's not much that we can say regarding the ice rink, but I think that it's important for us to pursue in some way, shape, or form, regardless of what we're currently working on, that at some point we need to have an ice rink for our community to enjoy and use. And through the Yentile project, I also want to say publicly that I'm committed to the development of a dog park in town and what that entails in the short term. And I know that we've looked at that. So I don't want to be viewed as talking about dogs and ice skating as it relates to substance abuse, and I don't want people to draw those comparisons. But I think if we're getting everything out on the table, those things need to be said, and I think they all have value on their own and in their own way for very specific, valuable reasons. And I would just close with that.
Thanks. Good enough to work with that, Jeff?
I think I'm good for the moment.
That's good. I really compliment you all, and I thank you all for sort of putting up with the irregular bullet item on the agenda. And I think from my perspective, it was well worth it to hear the commentaries and the viewpoints of all of you. Thank you very much. Let's get down to the fun. Jeff, under communications, please.
Yes, under communications, the first item is correspondence from Carl Quickenbush from the Metropolitan Planning Organization. He's announcing the start of the annual process to develop the Transportation Improvement Plan, otherwise known as the TIP, which is a federal program. This program runs from fiscal 17 to fiscal 2021. That's the federal fiscal year. He notes that the group is looking to endorse a plan by June 23rd of 2015. He is looking for a contact person or a point person from Wilmington. I've designated Valerie Gingrich as that person. And I would just note, as a point of information, that one of the projects on the current TIP is the New Boston Street Bridge, which was discussed at a previous meeting. There are, just by way of information, there's going to be some workshops held to discuss the creation of the TIP or the revision of the TIP. The first being on Tuesday, December 15th, from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Waltham Government Center building. The second session being Tuesday, January 12th, 2016, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m., the Chelsea City Hall.
Thank you.
Next, we have correspondence from the Director of Accounts, Mary Jane Handy, and this is regarding the town's tax rate for fiscal 2016. So you'll recall back on the meeting of November 23rd, Karen Rashis, the principal assessor, was before the board to look for direction with regard to the tax classification. Based upon the information that was received from that meeting, she submitted that information as well as other records to the Bureau of Accounts, and they in turn have adopted or authorized the current tax rate, which is $14.63 per $1,000 in value for a residential property, and $33.17 per $1,000 of value on the CIP. That compares with the prior fiscal year rate, 2015 rate of $14.37 per thousand and $32.74 per thousand. There's a memo from me to the board. This is with regard to the facilities master plan. Just informing the board that I signed a contract with the Cecil Group of Boston in the amount of $142,750. That's based upon the recommendation of the committee. This project is estimated to run about 12 months. And the initial steps that the consultant is taking is to gather information from the various departments. George Hooper has certainly been a real important contact because he has a lot of records with regard to the buildings. There'll also be a survey that'll be going out to the various department managers, looking for information from them in terms of their perspective on the use of their existing facilities and what they're looking for going forward. The meetings are typically going to be held monthly. The next meeting will be the 14th of January at 7 p.m. There will not be a meeting in February due to the schedule that we have with the Finance Committee, but then they'll pick up again in March. Next is a memo to the board from me with regard to animal control. This is just updating the board. You'll recall that Ellen Davis retired in late November. We've been investigating the option of regional animal control with the idea of perhaps joining with a couple of neighboring communities to share a full-time ACO and possibly some additional part-time assistance. Under this model, one of those communities would serve as the host community, employing the individuals that would serve the group and also providing the kenneling services. At the end of the day, so to speak, based upon the review, those costs would roughly come in at around $55,000 to $60,000 to be a part of a regional effort like that. One of the challenges certainly would be to triage the calls that come in from the various communities, particularly if they're in the same time frame. At this point, based upon my sense of both that, looking at that information as well as the prospect of hiring an individual to serve on a full-time basis, I believe the best approach is to go with a full-time animal control officer, similar to what we've had for the last many years. obviously, the benefit here is that this individual is dedicated specifically to Wilmington. It's certainly my expectation that this individual, once hired, will provide an improved level of service, a higher level of service, in part because there have been changes recently in the state law that governs animal control. We've revised the job description to address the requirements of animal control. And I would just note, just in terms of the level of activity, that it's going to involve both educating the public about their responsibilities as animal owners, doing the inspections. The individual would be required to be certified, going through an academy that's set up specifically for animal control officers. Just by way of information, in terms of the scale of activity, we have approximately 2,300 dogs that are registered. There's over 460 other animals ranging from chickens, rabbits, goats that are licensed through the Board of Health. We have 40 barns throughout town that require barn inspections. So because of that level of activity, I think it warrants the continuation of a full-time animal control officer. My expectation is, so the position is being posted currently. I'd be looking to have interviews conducted in January with the expectation of having someone on board in late February.
Very good.
The next memo is from me to the board with regard to Kinder Morgan. Just providing a brief update. So Tennessee Gas, which is a subsidiary of Kinder Morgan, filed their application with FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to seek the authorization to extend gas lines up in this region. That filing was done on November 20th. FERC accepted the filing in a letter issued on December 7th, assigned a docket number of CP 16-21-000. They've set January 6th as the deadline to file as an intervener. It's our intention to make that filing this week. I'll be meeting with Paul Aluni tomorrow. He's already prepared a draft to that effect. Subsequent to this filing by, or issuance of a letter by FERC, there's a 90-day, within 90 days, FERC will issue a notice of schedule for environmental review, and that will set out the process for the environmental review that FERC does. They'll initially develop a draft environmental impact statement. There'll be a comment period that will be made available for interested parties, and then they'll issue a final environmental impact statement. Kinder Morgan, in their filing, was seeking to have this process concluded by FERC by the close of 2016. So we'll see. I don't know that that's necessarily a guarantee. I wouldn't be surprised if there are continuances on that review. Next, under correspondence, is a letter from Alan Ford, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs at Kinder Morgan, and he just simply reiterates what I just noted, that the Tennessee Gas had filed their request for a certificate of public conveyance and necessity for the project known as the Northeast Energy Direct Project, and just indicates that they will adhere to the process going forward. Then I would just note the board also received correspondence from Daniel Veerman, Esquire, with regard to a potential conflict in his role as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'll just read this into the record. It's dated November 20th. As you are aware, I am a member of the Wilmington Board of Appeals. It has just recently and informally been brought to my attention that the 4th of July Committee will be applying for a special permit to locate the 4th of July Carnival to the property known as the former Swain School site on Middlesex Avenue for this year's upcoming Independence Day celebration. The area is directly across the street from my residence at 131 Middlesex Avenue. Although I am not sure if I am technically a direct abutter, I certainly may be and clearly live within 300 feet of the area. I had previously contacted Town Council's office when this first became an issue and spoke to Attorney Lewis Ross, who informed me that due to the proximity of my residence to the area in question, the safe course of conduct would be to recuse myself from hearing the committee's special permit application, since a direct abutter would be presumed to have a financial interest in the matter. Although I do not believe the carnival would necessarily benefit or disadvantage me financially due to the location of my house to the area, I was advised that the presumption of a financial interest is a matter of law, if not fact. The last time this was an issue, I had communication with Attorney Ross and learned my recusal would compromise the number of votes needed for the board to entertain the matter because Tony Barletta's role on the July 4th committee. He advised me to communicate my conflict to my appointing authority, namely the Board of Selectmen, and they ultimately decided to waive both me and Mr. Barletta's conflict after proper deliberation and decision. Toward that end, please forward this communication to the Board of Selectmen should they decide to entertain the issue on Monday, deliberate and take such action. Please feel free to contact me as needed.
So, the Zoning Board of Appeals will be hearing from the 4th of July Committee, I believe, what is it, January 11th or something? 13th. And Mr. Barletta is no longer conflicted as he was in 3 years ago because he is no longer a part of the 4th of July Committee. It is, I guess, our decision to make as to whether or not Mr. Veerman is conflicted and should be not voting as part of that committee, or if in fact he's not conflicted. If he's not, I guess we would have to move to free him from his conflict. So I'd say, from my perspective, I would rather have an entire contingent of the Zoning Board of Appeals here, listen, and vote on this matter. I believe that Mr. Veerman is a professional and has the ability to listen to the merits of whatever proposal is put forth and make a decision that is in his interest, is in his judgment, in the best interest of the town of Wilmington, irrespective of whether it makes him happy or not. So I think there's enough distance between his property and where the proposal is being made for that it's a fuzzy line, and I certainly don't believe that there's any financial interest at all. So I personally am of the mind that Mr. Veerman should be free to listen to and vote on the matter. But I put that out on the table and ask for commentary, discussion, or a motion.
I agree with that, and that's a determination that we made a couple years ago, whatever year that was.
Now, yeah.
Yes, I would just note for the board's information that back on, at a board meeting on March 25th of 2013, the board considered this same situation. The July 4th committee at the time was looking to go to the Board of Appeals for a special permit, and circumstances were essentially identical, with the exception that Mr. Barletta was conflicted at that time, and he is no longer conflicted. So from my perspective, I would recommend that the board determine that Daniel Veerman's ownership of the property near the carnival site is not so substantial a conflict as to likely affect him from impartially acting on the committee's special permit application submitted by the 4th of July committee.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or observations?
I'd offer a motion then that the board find that there's no financial interest and waive any potential conflict as particularly articulated by the town manager.
Second.
That motion's made and seconded. Is there further discussion? I see none. All in favor?
I'm just going to abstain.
Okay,
Because I'm on the 4th of July committee, I just don't want to.
indeed, thank you
Make
for that.
any-
Judy, I'm sorry, did you raise an approval of that, or were you?
I raised it
You
for
did,
approval.
all right, forgive me, I wasn't sure. So there's 3 and 1 abstain. 4 and 1 abstain, because my hand was there too. Thank you. So now we have a board to consider for lots of stuff. Board to consider the approval of 2016 licenses for alcoholic beverages, automatic amusements, billiard room, Class 1 garage, Class 2 garage, common victualler, and entertainment. And forgive me, my rookie chairmanship in terms of this aspect. Do we take these up by category and read off all of the members within each category and vote for the whole list, or?
I think that there's no correct way, so to speak, but I believe in the past that the board has taken it up by category, and I can simply reference the licenses to be considered and then vote by category.
That's my memory as well. Is there objection to handling it in that manner?
No, just wanted to, before we go to that, Mr. Chairman, number 6, are you passing over that?
Oh, I saw Board of Appeals.
Or did I miss something?
Board of Appeals, I think there was a vote.
Is
No,
that what
was
that?
That was
Okay.
the Dan Veerman letters. I don't think item 6.
So it was a 2-part, okay, gotcha.
2 for 1?
Request the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, the letter was the last of the correspondence, and then you moved to the
Right.
first
Right.
board to
Right.
consider,
Yes,
right?
It is a little bit
That's how I
confusing
took
the way
it.
it's shown here, but
Okay.
yeah, 6 belongs to the communication before it. Thank you for bringing that up.
Getting kind of late. I know we haven't been working past this hour in a long time, so everyone's getting a little silly.
Getting a little
I guess, huh?
punchy.
There you go.
So unless there's objection, we'll take up these licenses by category, and this is for the all alcohol license renewals, and I'll,
So
Hand it
under
to
the
you.
all alcohol, there are 2 all alcohol licenses for clubs, and that is Fordham Associates, Inc., DBA Aleppo Temple at 99 Fordham Road, and then the 4982 Building Associates, Inc., DBA Knights of Columbus at 112 Middlesex Avenue. This is for an all alcohol club license.
do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous? Package store license, including Sunday sale.
I would also note, just by, just to make the board aware here, that each of these licenses that have been, or will be brought up, have been reviewed by the appropriate department. In the case of the alcohol licenses, the police department, and have been, there's no concerns expressed by the chief.
Thank you.
Under the all-alcohol package store, there are 5. The first is Iverich LLC, DBA Colonial Park Liquors, 35 Lowell Street, Unit 9. 211 Lowell Street Corp., DBA Eastgate Liquor, that's 211 J Lowell Street. ShopRite Liquors, Inc., DBA Eli's Country Store at 381 Middlesex Ave. Super Target Liquors of Massachusetts, DBA Target at 210 Ballardvale Street, and Mystic Liquors, Inc., DBA Wilmington Plaza Wine and Spirit, 258 Main Street.
Is there a motion?
We'll make a motion to accept as described by the manager.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous? Restaurant licenses.
Yes, next we have the all-alcohol restaurant licenses. There are 8. Restaurant of Boston LLC, DBA 99 Restaurant and Pub, 144 Lowell Street. Pepper Dining, Inc., DBA Chili's Grill and Bar, 207 Main Street. A&C Stone, Inc., DBA Golden Ginger Restaurant, 225 Main Street. Samana Baree, Inc., DBA Michael's Place, 110 Lowell Street. Pacific Sunshine, Inc., DBA Pacific Grove, 211 E Lowell Street, also known as 217 Lowell Street. BGP Tavern, LLC, DBA Red Heat Tavern, 300 Lowell Street. C&C Restaurant Group, LLC, DBA Rocco's Restaurant, 193 Main Street. Tremezzo's, 2 Lowell Street.
I have just a real quick question. I was going through the applications, and I saw that some of these facilities, or some of these restaurants maintain a liquor liability insurance, and some others don't. And forgive me for asking an obvious question, or maybe a stupid question, but that's not a requirement that the town puts on these restaurants at this time? Is it an option that some have exercised? In fact, I saw that it was circled in a couple of cases, but then I was looking for it in others, and it wasn't there. They keep their general liability, but I didn't notice the presence of liquor liability, so I didn't know if there was some reason for that.
I believe they're all required to have liquor liability, yeah. If there are particular ones that,
Say again?
we can check if there are particular ones that you have some concerns about, but my expectation is that they all have the liquor liability insurance.
I'll presume that to be the case, and I'm just not schooled in reading some of these license applications, so, and that's fine. I just didn't catch my eye. So if they've been recommended for approval, then I would accept their approval as well. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor?
I'll abstain from, thank you, Beverly. Michael's Place, thank you.
Did you get that, Bevel? Thank you.
Next, under automatic amusement devices, we have K1 Speed Inc., 40 Fordham Road. There are 8 devices. And again, the police chief has looked at those and has no concerns.
So that's a one-item category, automatic amusement device license. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Unanimous? Billiard room.
Billiard room, 1 billiard room license, again, K1 Speed Inc., 40 Fordham Road. Again, the chief has no concerns.
Move to grant the request.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Unanimous?
Next is the Class 1. There are 2 Class 1 licenses. Doobie Auto Group, Inc., DBA Bill Doobie Hyundai, 271 Main Street. Semino Automotive, Inc., DBA Cornerstone Automotive and Cornerstone Mitsubishi, 580 Main Street. Again, the police department has reviewed these licenses and finds no problem.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Unanimous? Class 2 garage.
Class 2 garage, there are 8. Wilmington Shell, Inc., DBA Advanced Auto Technologies, 779 Woburn Street. Charlie's Auto Sales, 611 Main Street. Forest Auto Repair, 600 Main Street. Heavy Equipment Connection, Inc., 239 Andover Street. Imperial Auto LLC, 845 Woburn Street. Suite D. J&E Services Corp., 619 Rear Main Street. NEA Inc., DBA Z&S Gas and Service, 603 Main Street. Unique Auto Care Inc., 611 Main Street. These have been reviewed as well and no issue.
Is there a motion?
Move to grant the Class 2 licenses as summarized by the manager.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
The next are common victulars. There are 41. And just by way of information, they have been reviewed by Shelley Newhouse, the health director, in terms of compliance with Board of Health code and also reviewed by the building inspector in terms of zoning, and there are no issues.
No Chipotle's, right? No Chipotle's there at all?
No Chipotle's, no.
Jeez. Thanks, Mr. McCoy.
So we'll start with 99 Restaurant of Boston LLC, DBA 99 Restaurant and Pub, 144 Lowell Street, and Jam Corp., DBA AJ's Kitchen, 162 Lowell Street, Fordham Associates Inc., DBA Aleppo Temple, 99 Fordham Road, D's Corner LLC, DBA As Good As It Gets Cafe, 35 Lowell Street, Unit 8, Brothers Roast Beef and Pizza, 331 Main Street, Mastorano Corporation and LBK LLC, DBA Burger King, 280 Lowell Street, Pepper Dining Inc., DBA Chili's Grill and Bar, 207 Main Street, Hung Tao Inc., DBA China Walk, 329 Main Street, Krish Convenience Inc., DBA The Corner Store, 296 Shawshene Ave, Suite 1, Country Chef Restaurant, 139 Main Street, Adam Donuts Inc., DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 211 Lowell Street, DJQ Donuts LLC, DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 66S Concord Street, Hannon Donuts LLC, DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 357 Middlesex Ave, Jane Marie Donuts LLC, DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 206 Ballardvale Street, CNC Donuts Inc., DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 195 Main Street, Wilmington Donuts Inc., DBA Dunkin' Donuts, 329 Main Street. Just a reminder, there will be a quiz on the number of Dunkin' Donuts in Wilmington.
Just Xerox my thoughts.
A&C Stone Inc., DBA Golden Ginger Restaurant, 225 Main Street, 579 Main Street, Donut Shop Inc., DBA Heavenly Donuts, 579 Main Street, House of Pizza Inc., 325 Main Street, Jasmine Cuisine Inc., DBA Jasmine Cuisine Restaurant, 35 Lowell Street, 4982 Building Associates Inc., DBA Knights of Columbus, 112 Middlesex Ave, T.H. McCoy Restaurant Group LLC, DBA McDonald's Restaurant, 212 Main Street, Semonberry Inc., DBA Michael's Place, 110 Lowell Street, Pacific Sunshine Inc., DBA Pacific Grove, 211 East Lowell Street, and 217 Lowell Street. PR Restaurant LLC, DBA Panera Bread, 228 Main Street, K1 Speed Inc., 40 Fordham Road, KQ Inc., DBA Peter's Pizza, Roast Beef and Seafood, 2 Lowell Street, BJP Tavern LLC, DBA Red Heat Tavern, 300 Lowell Street, Rizzo's Roast Beef and Pizza Inc., 3R Church Street, Units 1 and 2, CNC Restaurant Group, Inc., DBA Rocco's Restaurant, 193 Main Street, Mordish Cafe, formerly known as the Sandwich Exchange, 16 Upton Drive, Charlie's 2 Corporation, DBA Samard's Super Beef, 279 Main Street, Monastero Restaurant Group Number 2 LLC, DBA Sonic Drive-In, 220 Main Street, Starbucks Corporation, DBA Starbucks Coffee, 253 Main Street, Kamar's Store, DBA Subway, 66U Concord Street, Sunnyside Cafe, 2 Jefferson Road, Diane T. Cuts, DBA Sunrise Kitchen, 355 Middlesex Ave, Sweet Pizza Inc., DBA Sweet Pizza, 206 Ballardvale Street, Unit 4, Target Corporation, 210 Ballardvale Street, LLM Inc., DBA Tremezzo, 2 Lowell Street, Watertown Enterprises, DBA Subway, 206 Ballardvale Street, Unit 2. And we would just note that the following establishments did not renew. Carmela Stop and Go LLC, 3 Jefferson Road, Quezon Donuts LLC, DBA Honeydew Donuts, 337 Main Street, and Pink Melon Inc., DBA Pink Melon Frozen Yogurts, 211 Main Street. So other than those 3, the others are all up for renewal.
Go through that one more time. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Abstain from Michael's, thank you.
Unanimous with the exception of Michael McCoy on Michael's Place.
Thank you.
What was the final count of those again?
Yeah, I know.
Six.
Is this 6?
I thought it was
I think it's 7, actually, isn't it?
There's more,
Seems like
there's more Dunkin' Donuts than there's. Never thought I'd
Oh,
say
that's what it
There's
is,
more
right?
Dunkin'
There's
Donuts
some-
than pizza restaurants, right?
There's some gas station ones that don't
Yes.
have victualer's license. That's the
Yeah, it's
nuance.
That's the nuance.
How many? 6 or 7?
It's more than 6.
Entertainment, we have 4 entertainment licenses, and the entertainment licenses have been reviewed by the police chief. He has no issues. First one being Sunshine Inc., DBA Pacific Grove, 211 East Lowell Street, BJP Tavern LLC, DBA Red Heat Tavern, 300 Lowell Street, Rocco's Restaurant, 193 Main Street, LLM Inc., DBA Terezzo, 2 Lowell Street.
Is there a motion to approve the entertainment license?
So moved.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Is unanimous. Thank you.
Next on the board to consider is a license, Sunday entertainment license, which is, the board needs to consider. This is, yes, this is for K1 Speed, Inc.
I want to just make a motion to issue the Sunday entertainment license, but I'm trying to remember if we had any limitations on times over there, and if we did, I just wanted to incorporate what we had already done. Does anyone remember that?
Let's see, the Sunday regular hours, Sunday 1 p.m. to midnight. This Sunday.
I don't remember what we discussed when he was here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, actually, looking at the license here, it's, he's submitted a request for 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday.
Do you,
I guess it just,
Do you wanna-
as long as we have those hours, and I don't see a problem with them because of the location, so. So I would offer the motion to grant the request for the Sunday entertainment license for those hours.
Second.
motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
This one just requires your signature.
New business and committee reports. I will start down to my left. Ms. O'Connell?
I am going to hold off this evening and
And?
not comment.
And not comment. Very well. Mr. McCoy? I blew it off. And do me a favor,
It's not personal, it's 2 real quick things about what was said tonight.
Okay, that's fine. We'll go to you. I was gonna come back to you after committee reports, but go ahead, please.
George Lindercroft, 11 Concord Street.
Thank you, George.
I just wondered if the selectmen or Jeff all could follow up with the red and light people. I was curious when we were talking about the capacity and transmission, potential tax increases of 6 to 7% or 9% or something annually for the next 2 years. Did that include any kind of an element on a punitive tax, like a carbon credit tax or a carbon tax, or was that just a strict, if somehow or other we could find out some more comment on what exactly capacity and transmission increase, what that entails? If they didn't, if they explained it, maybe I missed it. I just wanted to find out. That's a big increase. I just wanted a little more information on that.
Yeah, I can certainly make the inquiries to find out what, you're asking what makes up that,
It was, I think she said it was capacity and, it was pretty
Yes.
clear that the new plant going in was a capital cost, but she accounted for that differently. But there was a large increase, it sounded like, of 67% of our bill, which I thought she equated to something called capacity and transmission. And I just,
right.
I was interested in knowing what that meant. Was a large element of that some kind of new punitive tax, or what did that entail?
My understanding is that it's the cost, the capital cost essentially of constructing this new facility, which will replace the Salem plant that was taken offline. So there's a $600 million, I believe was the number she referenced, cost to construct this new power generating facility. And so that or either all of that cost or a significant portion of that cost is going to be passed on to the ratepayers. So it essentially is a pass-through for RMLD and gets distributed amongst the RMLD ratepayers and other ratepayers that get power from that source.
Maybe I missed that. I thought that were separate items. And I appreciate that. My last quick comment was just to throw in some public comment on the proposed zoning change. I'd like to get a chance to look at that more closely, but I think that has a tremendous potential for some high-density development in that area, and I would look at that very closely before you just made a carte blanche approval of that. I mean, I just looking at that at a glance, it looks like they could put in triple-decker rows of houses in there or something. So I'd be really cautious about that.
Oh,
That's
fairly
my only
safe.
comments.
Thank you, Mr. Lingenfelter. That's something that would go before the town anyway, am I right? I mean,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
a town meeting vote. So, you know, we were hearing about it this evening, but it'll come before the town. So I'm sorry, we were at committee reports, so new business, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you.
Very well. Mr. Newhouse.
All set down here.
For me, I'm just going to simply say, because we're not going to meet again, I offer each of you Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and everyone be safe during the holidays. I offer everyone out listening to this Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. Jeff?
Just by way of information here under important dates, we have the town offices will be closing early on the 24th of December, which is the day before Christmas, so we'll be closing at noon here at the town hall. Offices closed on Friday the 25th. Also, January 1st, town offices are closed. January 4th through the 15th will be the curbside collection of Christmas trees. January 10th is the Harnden Tavern Open House, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Next meeting of the Board of Selectmen is January 11th here in Room 9. And I would just want to also note a particular, I guess, achievement, if you will, or certainly a milestone. Want to note the Jess Hudson Fanjoy is a longtime resident of Wilmington. As my understanding, has lived in Wilmington since 1927. She will be turning 100 on December 31st. I'm told she still drives and is also a regular at the senior center, a very spry individual, and apparently the 100 is the new 80. So we wish her all the best and a healthy and active new year.
You're here. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jesse.
That's great news. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. But we don't get to leave yet. Good night.